Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I'll call into open session the meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for June 20th, beginning at 7:15 p.m. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight to be with us this evening. We will start our meeting with the opening ceremony. Please join as we talk about budget tonight for the hopefully getting a budget. Please join Ms. Powell in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, if you would, please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Please silence all your cell phones, electronic devices to avoid disruption to those around you during this meeting. Now we have our first agenda item under programs and presentations. First we have is our post-legislative briefing by Hilco, Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg. At this time, we'd like to invite to the podium David Anderson from Hilco. He's our legislative consultant, and to give us an update on this session, David, welcome.
Thank you. Trustees, Dr. Cavazos, staff, audience, thank you very much. There's a lot of information on the PowerPoint. We're not going to hit every one of the points that are on there. That information is there for you to contemplate. I'll tell you that it was a pleasure working with all of you during the legislative session, and as several of you know from conversations we've had recently, a very successful legislative session for students and for public ed in general. Before we start with what happened in the 140 days, I'd like you to think back 6 months to where we were when the legislative session began. We were facing one of the most significant, we were coming off one of the most significant cuts that we have seen in Texas. We'd have to go back to the 1930s and 40s to find one that was as significant as what we had. Certainly the most significant cut, the only reduction in state funding at that level that we had seen since the Gilmer-Aiken Law was passed in '49. We were coming into a session, however, in which the economic circumstances were much better, with the surplus of over $8 billion, economic stabilization fund of over $8 billion. We also had the circumstances surrounding the school finance lawsuit, and as we began the session, we talked quite a bit about the circumstances in Austin with change in the legislature, with the number of new members, the number of inexperienced members, and different leadership in the committees that most concern us with education and with finance and appropriations. When we talked in January, there were a number of issues that we identified as issues that would be ones that received attention during the legislative session. Infrastructure needs, state pension policy, the discussion of whether defined benefit or defined contribution approaches were better, tax policy, accountability and assessment in public ed, our graduation requirements, career and technical ed, our sunset recommendations for TEA, and local debt. All of those were issues that we had talked about in our work session. I also predicted for you that there would be little, if any, new money beyond enrollment growth. And that's one area in which you can say, Anderson, you missed the mark pretty significantly on that. At the time we said we expect to see enrollment growth funded, we expect to see some restoration of SSI, but we would probably nibble around the edges because the legislature would not be very inclined to put much money into public education while the lawsuit was pending. What we didn't recognize, or what we recognized but we didn't know exactly how that would play out would be the impact of the mothers. We recognized that Texans advocating meaningful student assessment was going to be a significant force during the legislative session, that they would have an impact on House Bill 5. What we didn't anticipate was how far-reaching that impact would be. That was a group that had a significant level of influence on what happened. Some of the things that we really missed on were the local government transparency bills that were offered up by Controller Combs and by other members that would have added many requirements or duplicated some requirements for you regarding your election circumstances. Prohibitions and limitations on certain financial tools, particularly capital appreciation bonds, the structural changes that came with TES, and the school security proposals that really were an offshoot of the tragic circumstance in Connecticut. We also did not anticipate the influence of one of the new policy lobby groups that became engaged in education and their proposals for parent trigger legislation and achievement school district legislation. Those were all things that occurred as the session went on. So those were areas in which we missed. We also missed very much on the C-scope controversy. We knew that C-scope would get some attention, but the level of attention that that received, the criticism that received from some of the members was much greater than we anticipated. And then, of course, the funding that we talked about. We do have some information for you in the PowerPoint. We won't go through all of this, but it gives you a pretty good overview of the public education spending, the appropriations that were passed in the two bills. The two bills with the appropriations, Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1025, of course, address the money. On the education front, the other two major bills this session were House Bill 5 and Senate Bill 2. Anyone who visited with members in the House or in the Senate with staff during the legislative session recognized that those two bills were absolutely joined at the hip, and the success of one was going to be dependent upon the success of the other. Both of those bills passed overwhelmingly. They didn't get there easily. There was a lot of work that was done by many different groups and organizations and individuals to get us to a point where we had comprehensive legislation with House Bill 5, a bill that is 115 pages long, and each time I read it, I find something new, it seems, with that bill. Senate Bill 2, major overhaul of charter legislation and charter policy, and of course we'll have a lot to do with the rulemaking for both of those bills over the next 6 to 8 months. The Charter School Reform Bill has a number of points. The one thing that I do want to point out that's significant for you, board members, is the third bullet, the creation of a new district charter that gives you the flexibility to address changes that you may want to make in a low-performing campus. There are certain criteria that are there. We'll be watching the rulemaking very carefully on that. On House Bill 5, major areas that were addressed, of course, are the graduation requirements. It reaffirms the notion in Texas that we have one diploma, but we have several different ways to get there. I think that when you look at the legislation, you'll see that Dr. Aycock, the bill sponsor from Killeen, did a pretty amazing job of creating flexibility and extending out the options for students with their graduation plans while maintaining a level of rigor and course expectation that was a concern to educators, trustees, and business leaders around the state. One of the points I would mention that you see here is the requirement for all students to have a personal graduation plan. We've been moving that direction for several years, but this reaffirms the notion that students, when they're in 7th grade and 8th grade, when they're getting their counseling on what is expected of them to graduate from high school with course credits and testing requirements, that we develop an individual graduation plan for each of those students. It also affected college admissions. It eliminated the requirement that you have to complete a recommended plan to be eligible to apply to a 4-year public institution. It really puts all of the options that kids have on equal footing with regard to their college choices. A great chart was developed. Again, we won't go through all of this. It's there for you to use. This was developed by the House Public Education Committee staff that lays out visually how this will work. And this is a wonderful tool for you to look at and to see the big pieces, the big blocks of House Bill 5 with regard to graduation plans. It also addressed state assessment, and this is where the Mothers Organization, TAMSA, and the various other groups like that around the state had a big impact. House Bill 5 only speaks to the high school testing requirements. 3 through 8 testing requirements were addressed in 2 other bills. one that was signed by the governor, one that was vetoed by the governor. The one that was signed is subject to federal waiver, so the actual impact of that, Dr. Cavazos, remains to be seen. We know that Commissioner Williams has had conversations recently with regard to federal waivers, but we won't know how that will play out probably for 6 to 8 months. Some of the issues that you had as priorities on your legislative agenda this spring were addressed in 5, the 15% requirement, the elimination of that, the elimination of the cumulative score requirement were both addressed here. Critical point, I think, for Arlington, because of all you're doing with the College Board and with AP, there's a high degree of flexibility now for students and for school districts to use other tests that have implications beyond high school accountability to meet the graduation assessment requirements. And again, the rulemaking on that will be very telling for us. It's something we will need to continue to monitor and be engaged with. On the accountability, several main areas were covered, including how we will evaluate our schools in the new accountability system. It establishes a three-category rating system that takes into account the academic rating, the financial performance, and a level of community and student engagement that gives you as trustees an opportunity to have a lot of input from the community as to what is important in Arlington and how is it that we are going to hold ourselves and our schools accountable for things that are important to us here in the community. As you look ahead to what we're doing this year and next year, there are 2 recommendations that I have for you to pay particular attention to with regard to planning and budgeting for House Bill 5 implementation. The first one is one that you have a little bit more time to prepare for, and that is the 2014-15 requirements for your career and technical programs. You have a great example here of what I think the legislature had in mind with some of these provisions in House Bill 5 with your Firefighter Academy. Something that is important locally, something that is significant for students, something that will produce some very positive results for the community over the course of 2 to 3 to 4 years and beyond as those students come out. And as we talked about earlier, a great story in the paper in the Star-Telegram this week about the first group of students. We have a year to prepare for this, and then that phases in with the students. And here in Arlington, again, you're in great shape because of your cooperation with higher ed institutions, the community college level and UT Arlington, and the engagement that you have with your businesses and industries here. More immediately, though, for 2013 and 14, is the expectation in the counseling area. I mentioned a few minutes ago the expectation that students will have an individual graduation plan. This bill speaks very significantly to the need to have the right ratio of counselors to students and the right level of engagement for counselors and students. If that's not done correctly, in my opinion, we're going to be back here back in the legislature in 2 years and in 4 years, fighting off a lot of changes that I think none of us would be interested in seeing. The counselor staffing and the counselor training is something that I think is one of the most significant points to come out of the bill, and I would encourage you to pay particular attention to that area as we go forward. There were several other bills that we mentioned in our report to you in the PowerPoint. One that I'd like to point out is a very unusual circumstance, and that's the credit by exam. We have 150 House members and 31 senators that work very hard to pass a bill or a few bills, and they struggle to get through the system. Credit by exam passed twice, the same bill. The House bill passed and the Senate bill passed. It's one that creates a great deal of flexibility for school districts and provides other options for students to earn credit, and one that I think will have some significant impact, effects on students and how they're able to earn their credits and go forward. Supplemental services, breakfast program, one that Ms. Powell was very helpful in affecting some changes in that bill as we went through the session. We did get a Common Core restriction, virtual school network bill that at one point looked like a virtual voucher bill for the state, but through some very good work by by the folks advocating on behalf of the 4 statewide teacher organizations and Raise Your Hand Texas turned out to be a piece of legislation that is very, very positive and will provide some opportunities for large districts and small districts to give students opportunities for learning beyond the school day. The teacher retirement system bill, we mentioned earlier the fight that was brewing before the session began on defined benefits versus defined contributions. Senator Duncan's bill on the teacher retirement system, I believe, creates a structure that is going to make it very difficult to criticize the financial circumstances of that program for a number of years. 3 through 8 grade assessment, we mentioned House Bill 866 is the one that's going to require the federal waiver. You know that you have some problems in your school district when there's a package of bills that are named for you. And we hope that if we ever see an Arlington package, it's because they're trying to emulate programs that you are doing for the rest of the state. That's not the case in the El Paso package. I did want to mention these because several of them have to do with governance. The first 2 bills are on here just to let you know what happened. They're bracketed specifically to El Paso ISD, and they have to do with financial statements for trustees and recovery programs that the district is required. The district is already offering, but now legally they have to do it. The other 3 bills came about as a result of concerns from the El Paso delegation about what happened in El Paso, but they have statewide effect. One added members of the Board of Trustees for our school districts to the list of office holders who may be removed from office. And the legal staff at TEA, I think, would take the position that that was probably there, but it was not specifically mentioned. It is now specifically mentioned in that part of the election code. The Senate Bill 123 does allow the commissioner to issue subpoenas regarding PEMS data and data tampering. Again, the legal staff, I believe, at TEA felt that that was something that they were allowed to address indirectly. Now they're able to do that directly through subpoena power. And then the last one creates a 3rd-degree felony for any employee found to have tampered with public school records, including the PEMS information. Several bills address board operations and governance. I think it's going to make it easier, particularly for those districts that are in the parts of the state that would be called districts that would be small and sparse, to conduct meetings. And again, you'll see some of these and be able to consider how they affect what you're doing here in Arlington. House Bill 2952 probably deserves one call out because that does address a time limit for the commissioner to make decisions in certain appeals against school districts. It does allow for a mutually agreed upon 60-day extension. A number of bills were passed that address school safety and discipline legislation. One bill that is on the veto list later that was on this originally was a truancy bill that started out very troublesome, particularly for our mid-urban districts such as Arlington. Some very good work by the state representative from Amarillo, Fort Price, got that bill to a position in which it was supported by TASA, TASB, School Alliance, and others. But in the final analysis, the governor determined that it was still troublesome to him and it was vetoed. But there is a package of 5 bills that speak to school safety and discipline that I know you'll be looking at, and we'll be monitoring that rule process also. What we know in public education is that we may not play great offense in terms of passing bills at times, but the public education community, TASA, TASB, School Alliance, the teacher organizations, can play some pretty incredible defense. And in this session, success for education and success for students, I believe, was marked by some very good defensive plays on bills. And this gives you an idea of some of the bills that were proposed that did not pass. The transparency issue was one that was very troublesome, I believe, because while all of us would advocate for greater transparency in our actions and in the actions of other local governments, a number of these bills were very redundant to requirements and created some requirements for you that in the final analysis would do very little to further explain what you might be doing with bond packages. If anything, I think we could make a case that it would obfuscate the issue for voters in many regards. The bills vetoed by the governor included the limitations on the types of beverages that can be sold to students. The High Performance Schools Consortium bill that the Texas Association of School Administrators was very supportive of was vetoed, as was the 3 through 8 assessment bill. And then the last one on the list is the one that I referenced earlier, Senate Bill 1234, that set up progressive sanctions for truant students and created some safeguards for parents and students in doing so. The last couple things that I would mention to you really have to do with the big picture of the statistics on legislation. This bill, in this legislative session, we had 5,868 bills filed. That does not include resolutions. That's a lower number than we saw in the last several sessions. 920 of those bills dealt with public ed, and that ratio is very consistent with what we have seen 2003, 5, 7, 9, and 11. 130 bills passed. That is the smallest number of bills that have passed in any of the sessions I've worked at Hillco or at TEA. And I think that overall, the responsibilities that you have as trustees, as superintendents, and staff, think that the small number of bills that passed relative to other sessions reaffirms the notion that, you know, we are doing some things pretty well. In light of what happened yesterday, I did want to mention one thing about the school finance litigation because it ties very directly to the legislative session. Yesterday, Judge John Dietz had a hearing on the school finance lawsuit, and as he noted in this, in the interest of justice, he has determined that we would have a supplemental trial in January to look at the impact of the appropriations and legislation, policy legislation, very specifically House Bill 5, on the school finance lawsuit. Two of the plaintiff groups objected to the delay. They really wanted to move on to the Supreme Court with all due haste. Well, the two largest plaintiff groups were very supportive of the judge's decision because their feeling, in talking to one of the attorneys today, their feeling was if we move on to the Supreme Court now without this analysis at the district court level, it will affect that final ruling at the Supreme Court in a way that could drag this out even longer. So I will also say that I believe Judge Dietz, by setting that hearing on June 19th, 3 days after the veto period, reinforced the notion that there were several bills, particularly House Bill 5, that probably should not be vetoed because of the circumstances it affects here. The possibility of a special session before the next legislature convenes in 2015, I think, is incredibly low. The timeline now makes that almost impossible. If the judge has a trial, this subsequent trial in January, by the time that goes through the appeals process, it's going to be the summer of 2014, or it gets to the Supreme Court in the summer of 2014 or the fall of 2014 at the earliest. The probability of a special session on school finance before we get into the next legislative session, I think, is just incredibly low. I'd be glad to stop at this point and see if there are any questions about any of the specific bills or anything else that occurred in the session for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Are there any questions from trustees? Mr. Pompa.
Thank you, President Barron. Just a quick question. Could you tell us a little bit more on House Bill, was it House Bill? Yeah. Senate Bill 1234. We've had a lot of focus on truancy and partnering with our Tarrant County and other folks that are interested in helping us with that. So can you tell us a little bit more about that one today, please?
That bill originally began in the Senate. It was a bill filed by Senator Whitmire, and it was one that, from a school leadership perspective, raised a number of concerns because of the restrictions that it placed on schools and their ability to work with truant students. After the bill came out of the Senate, the Texas Association of School Boards, Texas Association of School Administrators, the organization that represents the Justices of the Peace, the organization that represents the truant officers, got together, and coincidentally, some significant testimony, it wasn't public testimony, but significant engagement from people from El Paso County, El Paso ISD and El Paso County, met with staff from the Senate and the House sponsor, and in a just classic piece of legislative work, they got everyone together in a stakeholders meeting. They worked through all of the issues. They developed the progressive sanctions. They put in the provisions that were designed to protect students and parents to the greatest extent possible, but still allow the justice of the peace and the school districts to work together to keep kids in school and help provide some incentives to keep them there. As far as the governor's veto, Mr. Pompa, we really don't know thoroughly what happened with that, if he felt that it went too far to protect the interests of the school districts and the justice of the peace with regard to parent rights, but we'll know more about that over the next few weeks as we do our interviews with his staff. I would say that that is a bill that we will see again. I think that we'll see it start in a much better place in January of 2015, probably where it ended with the veto, with whatever changes might be necessary to satisfy whoever's governor at that time.
Thanks. I think this is a big opportunity for us as a district, and that's why we have a great deal of interest. And it seemed to me like this bill provided us with some pretty effective tools in terms of addressing truancy. Hopefully we can get it fixed up and get it passed at the next time. But what I liked about it is the fact that we weren't utilizing withholding of education as punishment for truancy. So, you know, that's kind of a good thing. So,
unfortunately, as the bill started, there were some anecdotes, and I know you're very aware that we often legislate by anecdote rather than legislate based on research and data. There were some anecdotes, one in particular that talked about a student who was expelled from school for being truant while he was in school. And it was the sort of thing that just, it makes it very difficult to explain to a concerned lawmaker or concerned staff member how something like that could happen. But the bill, I think, turned into a very good bill. I'm sorry that it was vetoed, because I think it would have been very helpful to you as trustees and to the superintendent, again, particularly in our mid-urban school districts.
and well, maybe I'll let Mr. Hogg ask this one about conferencing in for meetings. Did you see that?
Yep.
So is this even for a board meeting that we could conference in? Dr. Rice, that happens to have to be traveling today, he could,
Yes.
we could put him up on the screen and.
We still have to see the rulemaking go through on that, but I think that it recognizes that we have some communications tools available to us in 2013 and beyond that we didn't have before, but we had meeting requirements that were reflective of perhaps even the 19th century, but certainly not the 21st.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from trustees? Seeing none, Mr. Anderson, let me just say thank you for all your work. This board has taken a very aggressive approach to lawmaking.
Yes.
Mr. Pompa, we don't make laws like that. I say they make laws, the folks we vote for. So I thank you for all your work. I think you did the work of what, if possible, 2 or 3 of our staff members could do. So I thank you for that. I thank all the trustees for all the work we put in this session. There were many morning phone calls and times to discuss legislative sessions, and especially I want to thank staff for all the behind-the-scenes work, the researching of how bills would affect us and what would they do as a district, and influencing what happens in Austin. We many a times sit up here and discuss with a harsh tone what occurs in Austin. And I think we did a very good job of influencing bills, House Bill 5, and some other bills that are very beneficial to this district and influence what happens in Austin.
I would observe for you that there were 5 school districts that had a significant presence in the Capitol this session. And when you look at how things turned out for students in public ed with the legislation that passed and the appropriations that passed, had those 5 districts not had that level of engagement, I believe we'd be talking about things in a different way. Arlington is one of those 5, and I appreciate all that everyone did to make it easier for me to do my work and for us to be as effective as we were this session.
And thank you, Mr. Anderson. I think we also can't leave out two organizations, Raise Your Hand Texas, did a lot of great work during this session
Yes,
for
they
public
did.
education. And then I think legislators learned quickly, don't get a group of mad mothers
That's right.
out there against you, because anyone who's down in Austin saw the mothers in the Capitol, and no lawmaker will take anyone walking in there besides an upset mother to their office. And I think those mothers directly were the impact on House Bill 5 of reducing testing. And so I think they were the direct influence to influence that. So I must
Could
thank
not
all
agree
of
with
our,
you more. Both of those groups are grassroots organizations. They take very different approaches to how they work, and they were both very, very effective, and I believe public education in Texas is better because of TAMSA and Raise
Yep.
Your Hand Texas.
agree with you
Thank you.
100%. Thank you for all your work,
Sorry.
do lobbying for
Thank you.
education. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Next, we'll consider administrative appointments, and we don't have any of those for this evening. So we will move next to our public hearing portion of the meeting. Ms. Powell?
Good evening, President Hogg, board members, Dr. Cavazos. State law requires that before a board can adopt a budget, that it hold a public meeting, a hearing, to give individuals the opportunity to comment on the budget and the proposed tax rate. We're also required to publish a notice in the paper of the date and the time and location of that hearing. So tonight is the night that we have posted for having a public hearing on the 2013-14 budget and the proposed tax rate.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Powell. With that, I will move us into our open. We are now open for our public hearing for the 2013-14 budget and proposed tax rate. I don't have any cards for this public hearing. Ms. Jones, are there any other cards? Okay, thank you. Seeing there's no cards, the public hearing on the 2013-2014 budget and proposed tax rate is now closed. Next, we'll move on to our agenda item, open forum for agenda items. This is a routine part of the school board's agenda for regularly scheduled meetings. This segment of the meeting provides citizens with an opportunity to share their views with the trustees on items that are on the agenda tonight. It is not intended to be a discussion or debate, and trustees will not reply to speakers. Derogatory comments by individuals will not be tolerated. Personnel matters are not appropriate subjects for open forum. I have 3 cards from our audience this evening. When your name is called, please step to the podium. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. A lighted timer on the podium will assist you in your pacing your presentation. A yellow light will illuminate when there is 1 minute left for you to complete your presentation. When the red light comes on and the buzzer sounds, please end your presentation. Our 3 speakers in this order tonight will be Richard Weber, Jan Tyler, and Jessica Leary. First up, we have Mr. Richard Weber speaking on discussion item regarding community engagement component and facilities assessment. Good evening, Mr. Weber.
Good evening, all. Richard Weber, 2703 Crestmore Court. When I do a presentation like this, I prefer to be able to say I am in support of or oppose an item and give my reasons why. Unfortunately, in this case, I don't have enough information, so I have to deliver this more as a philosophy. 2 big questions on this item, as far as I'm concerned, is how much is this community engagement component going to cost, and what is supplied? I greatly prefer dealing with facts. Dealing with perceptions ranks real low as far as I'm concerned. Though someone may have a perception based on something that happened 10 years ago, I prefer dealing with the assessment facts of whether it is still broken or not. Again, I'm sorry I don't have a direct oppose, support, and bing, 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 why, but those are my opinions on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Next, we have Jan Tyler speaking about budget. Good evening, Ms. Tyler.
Good evening. Good evening, President Hogg, all members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos. My name is Jan Tyler. I'm a 6th grade teacher at Key Elementary. I'm a 32-year teacher employee with the AISD, and I've just completed my 37th year in teaching. I'm currently a member of the DIDC committee, and at the May DIDC meeting, Ms. Powell and her staff presented the preliminary budget report. Following that report, the committee had a very long discussion about salary, insurance contributions. It was very emotional when you have employees at every level sitting around talking about salaries and insurance. The DIC came to the same conclusion at the end of our meeting that the board did last Thursday, and that decision was that any money that was available should go to all employees' salaries because insurance contributions do not benefit 40% of the employees. So the DIDC totally supported what you all discussed last week at your meeting. But I would like to go back to a comment that Mr. Hibbs made last week at your meeting. He stated that $1.8 million is 0.6% of the $3 million, which is the cost for a 1% raise. I would like for you to consider a 3.6% raise for all employees and use that 1.8 that you had put aside for insurance contributions. I want to give you some real numbers of how that impacts an employee. Using the median salary of step 19 is $55,601. A 3% raise at that level would be $1,668 a year. A 3.5% raise would be $1,946 a year. And if you gave a 3.6% raise, it would be $2,001 a year. That's a morale booster. Because with that $2,000 at that level, I'm going to use Plan 2 of insurance to give you some real numbers. Plan 2, for an employee only, there's a $69 increase a month. That's $828 a year. After you take that $828 away from the $2,000 with the 3.6 raise, there'd be $1,200 left. We haven't had where an employee, after insurance costs, $100 on your paycheck. Now, we all know taxes are going to come out. That's not going to be net. But that is good. In most recent years, we have not had that kind of an increase. With the 2%, you barely cover your insurance costs, or the increase of the insurance costs. So I think that that's really a consideration that you should make. Just for your information, the total cost at Plan 2 for an employee only is $304, the new, in September, will be $304 a month. A spouse and an employee is $978 a month. If you didn't pay $225, it'd be $1,203 a month. The family deduction per month is $1,098, and that's Plan 2, that's the medium one. I think that by using these real numbers, it illustrates to you what an impact a small percentage can make to an employee. I think that I want you, with the real numbers. I felt last week when you were discussing that you needed to just hear concretely the difference between 3%, 3.5, and 3.6. I think it makes a difference. I want you to please consider using the $1.8 million for all employees to receive a 3.6% raise. Don't put that money back into the balance fund. It's a savings account. I think employee savings accounts are dwindling while the district's savings account is growing every year, this year to $177 million. I would like you, rather than putting it back into savings, to make an investment of $1.8 million into your employees. I think that we'll earn it with all the new projects that are coming, and I think you'll get a good return on your investment. I also think it would go a long ways to show that Arlington isn't worrying about whole numbers, whether it's 3% or 3.5, 3.6. It means that you went to the limit. You did everything you could to help your employees. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Tyler. Next up, representing UEA, we have Jessica Levy, talking about pay raises. Good evening, Jessica.
Good evening. President Hogg, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, I'm here to thank you for your support. Working together, we've come through some very challenging times. As UEA president, I want to take a moment and review the road we've traveled these last few years. During the last legislative session, the legislators decided it was wise to reduce funding to schools. The impact on AISD was immense, and there was a cry from the community to cut teachers. UEA spoke of the impact this would have on our district, and you listened. AISD did not cut teachers' jobs. Other drastic cuts were made to central office, aides, planning times, and an increase in class sizes, but no teacher jobs were lost. As the financial situation stabilized, and first areas were stored that impacted the classroom. Aides and guidance techs were restored before central office. Staffing patterns were increased, and only after instruction was bolstered did the district begin to rebuild the central office. I want to acknowledge the very hard work that the few who did hold this all together. Their efforts were extraordinary and honorable. Thank you for your work, your dedication, your sacrifice. Help is on the way, and hang in there just a bit longer. Last year, AISD was one of the few districts to give a raise, 2%, while many districts gave 0. This year again, AISD is recognizing the hard work of their staff and granting salary increases, and some employees will even see raises above the 3%. This action will move AISD back into a regional leadership role. Our work is far from done. We have a long way to go before AISD becomes the district envisioned by our strong strategic plan. We look forward to working together with the administration and the board to realize this dream. We pledge to keep our efforts going. We are honored to have worked side by side through this historic crisis. It is an exciting time to be in the AISD, and I believe our future is bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levy, and thank you to our 2 teachers that spoke tonight. It's always take a minute to recognize our employees in the district. Next on our agenda item is action items. First, consider adoption of the budget for 2013-14. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg. And we've been talking about the budget and brought back revisions and several versions of it. And at this time, Cindy Powell will present the budget recommendations. Ms. Powell.
Thank you. President Hogg, board members, Dr. Cavazos, we have been talking about budget for quite some time, and so this evening we actually present the budget for consideration, not simply discussion. Since last week's meeting, and at your direction at last week's meeting, we've made a couple of changes to the proposed budget. We have added into the budget funds for a 3% across the board raise. Funds to pay for a beginning teacher salary at $50,000, and to make equity adjustments to the teacher salary schedule from years 1 through 15 of the salary schedule. We've also made a similar adjustment in the food service fund for that 3% raise. This slide is a summary of the expenditure budgets in each of the funds presented for your consideration this evening. And you can see that now, with the changes we made last week, the sum of all funds is almost $600 million for our school district. The general fund in particular has an operating budget of $467.9 million as it stands at the moment. There's been no change in the information that we've prepared previously for the estimated tax rate. As we've discussed before, we will receive our certified property values on July 25th. We will come back to the board then in August with a recommendation for the tax rate to be adopted, and we'll adopt it at that time. Yeah. On to the respective funds. On the general fund in particular, this slide summarizes revenues, expenditures, and fund balance for us. You can see that as the budget is crafted at the moment, we have a surplus of $12,561,000. If the budget is adopted like this, that will bring our projected ending fund balance to $165.1 million. Now, at this point, as I was preparing this PowerPoint, this presentation this weekend, it began to strike me how many people have had a hand in developing this budget since November. And I think you're going to see in just a minute how significant this budget is and what we are able to do with it. So I thought that it would be wise at this point to acknowledge the efforts of everyone that did have a hand in this. I mean, it starts with the classroom teachers who gave their input on what they needed in the classroom, the school and department secretaries who compiled the requests and input the budgets into our team's budget system, principals and department administrators who worked with their site-based teams and their staffs to craft what they need for programs for next year. The HR department that did a tremendous job with the staffing process, despite having a couple of vacancies even amongst their own staff members. Certainly the business office, the finance folks that put all these pieces together when we get towards the end of the road. The Financial Futures Committee, DIDC, and certainly this board, and a number of people from the community who have offered comments to you all privately and also here in open forum. So I think that this is very significant, and I actually began to compile some bullet points of some of the more significant things that we are able to do with our budget this year. And again, you know, one of our speakers just talked about it being an exciting time in AISD, and it truly is. And when you look at what we have been able to provide in this year's budget, what I see here are services to kids, and carrying out our strategic plan. I think it's extremely significant and very impressive when you look at what we're able to provide here. A 3% raise, equity adjustments, steps 1 through 15. We've raised the starting teacher salary to make us more competitive with other districts in the area. We have $4.3 million in the budget for strategic plan initiatives, one-time costs for this upcoming year. Also new positions for growth and for new programs and to staff Adams Elementary. We also have money for tuition for our new career tech dual credit courses and costs to begin implementing an early college high school that we would put online in the 14-15 year. Also a number of curriculum and instruction initiatives. The 8th grade CTHE course, junior high acceleration opportunities, junior high athletics expansion. We have energy retrofit projects, classroom additions in Arlington and East Arlington, other capital needs such as copiers and vehicles for our white fleet. And then we have a number of very thoughtful recommendations that came from our Financial Futures Committee, including very significantly the first two items on here, an intervention period for our junior high schools and also kindergarten TAs. And you can see the list of other things that, that they recommended and this board has approved and we've included in the budget. So I think that, you know, what this shows is a tremendous effort from the entire community coming together from various perspectives to put this together, and this does represent service to our children and to our students that will certainly increase performance, and it is an exciting time to be part of AISD. So with that, then moving on back to the numbers part of this, with the budget as it stands now, as a proposed budget, we would wind up with an ending fund balance that actually represents over 4 months worth of operating expense on the total fund balance. And looking out several years, you can see that we continue to have a very healthy situation with our fund balance, and we've looked at this slide, discussed it at length in prior meetings, and I'll remind everyone that in the 14-15 year, the $9 million deficit that you see there is the result of a planned use of fund balance for construction of a new elementary school in East Arlington. So that's actually not even an operating expense, that's a capital expense. And the board approved a plan to use money in that way in December. So we're very healthy, and we make a lot of assumptions here always, and we will wait and see how they turn out and continue to refine this as we move along. At our last meeting, the board asked that the staff go back and model what it would take to give equity adjustments to raise the year 20 mark of our salary schedule, our teacher salary schedule, up to be more competitive. We've done that. It's actually a very minimal cost of a little over $80,000. We'll actually give some very, very small equity adjustments, steps 16 through 19, to smooth out the increments across those years on the salary schedule. And so with that, What you see before you is the teacher salary comparison chart that we've talked about in prior weeks. And you can see that in year 20, we would have a rank of 6 among our comparison districts if they all give 3% raises as we have projected at this point. And there's one district that is discussing a 4% raise, that's Fort Worth, and that is modeled as well in here. But we make a lot of assumptions here too on what other districts are going to do, and it's at this moment there are only, I believe, Irving and Pasadena have approved their raises for next year. Both of those are 3%. Grand Prairie has announced a proposed raise of 3%. They have not yet approved that. And then likewise, Fort Worth has discussed a 3 or 4% raise. They have not approved that. So we assume that everyone else on the list is going to give a 3% raise. So in the end, we probably won't look exactly like this, but I think it will be very close. The other thing that we recognize is that you know, we've made some significant adjustments here on the teacher salary schedule. We know and have for some time that we have some other positions that we think are not properly aligned with market conditions and salaries, and we are actually experiencing, and have been for a while, difficulty in bringing in people from outside the district in certain positions, and it's creating some strain in certain areas. And so this board has already determined as part of the strategic plan to perform a market study of salaries and to engage an HR consultant to help us develop a competitive compensation plan. This work was already built into the 2013-14 budget, and we were planning to start the process in the fall, and it's our desire to go ahead and accelerate the process so that we can bring back to you in August a recommendation to select a consultant to perform this study so that we can move on with it. And then, based on the outcome of that market study, if we determine that it's appropriate and necessary, we may come back to the board with recommendations for a budget amendment to make some adjustments. This slide shows what the general fund budget would be if the board chooses to grant those additional $80,000 equity adjustments in order to bump that year 20 salary up a little bit in the comparison chart. With this particular model, we would have a budget surplus of $12.5 million and an ending fund balance of $165,000. And then this slide simply runs that additional $80,000 through the forecast model. And so you can see it looks, again, very similar to what we've already discussed. And with the other funds, beyond the general fund, the only change that has occurred since the last meeting is food service. And again, that was to factor in the raise for food service, and you can see the results of that here. Debt service fund, again, reflects current our projection of property values. And we are assuming that we will be able to hold the tax rate level in that fund. We might be able to lower the rate ever so slightly once we get our certified values. We will not know for sure, though, until we see those values. So right now, the debt service tax rate is estimated to be the same as it is this year, which is 26.1 cents. The construction fund shows to have what appears to be a large deficit, but that's simply because we sold the bonds in February. Those funds close out to fund balance as of June 30th, and we will spend out of those proceeds in this upcoming year for the projects that we will be completing as the year goes on. Highlights, though, of that fund, in the debt service, or all those funds, in the debt service fund in particular, we've been able to reduce our debt cost because of the refunding we did recently. We look for those refunding opportunities whenever they are available to us. And fortunately, we were able to just do one, and so that's reflected in the budget. Construction fund, again, what you see budgeted there in terms of expense will help us complete projects that are part of the bond program. You can see a list of those here. In the Food Service Enterprise Fund, we do have to increase the price for full-price meals by 10 cents. That's actually a requirement so that we can comply with federal law for the Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act that was passed year before last. There's no price change for breakfast meals or reduced price meals. We also have provided in the Food Service Fund some additional costs for new positions to operate the kitchen at Adams and to take care of growth throughout the district in that program, and we built in that same 3% salary increase. In terms of next steps, we will take direction tonight from the board if there are any other changes to be made to the budget. We are required by law to have this budget adopted by June 30th, so we could have one more week if necessary to bring it back for consideration. And then certainly we will receive our certified property values on July 25th and adopt the rate, the tax rate in August. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ms. Powell, and I must take a minute to thank you and staff for all your hard work on this budget season. I know many of the other trustees will say that tonight, but it is truly, your amount of work is my 5th budget, and y'all have done a wonderful job presenting it.
Thank you.
Mr. Barron.
Good evening, Ms. Powell. With the addition of the required graduation plan at the 8th grade, are we going to need to augment the counseling staffs in the junior highs?
We have not evaluated that to be able to answer that question directly. Our staff will be working on that this summer to look through that bill and others to see if there's any other things that we need to adjust. We certainly will amend the budget if we find that that is necessary.
The requirement for free lunch for schools that have 80% students that have free lunch. Do we have any schools that are in that category?
That's in the breakfast
Right.
category we would have to provide meals to. We do have a few, I think, that exceed that. We do already provide breakfast in the classroom at a number of those facilities. So likewise, we're working with food service staff to determine if there are any others that we're going to be required to add. But we're in a position to do that with them.
Is that an unfunded mandate?
No, you get to claim the federal reimbursement on that.
Even for the kids that aren't on
Right,
free lunch?
exactly. The challenge there becomes that in order to make those programs work, the type of foods you serve are usually packaged in such a way that they're a little more expensive to provide. And so it may be that federal reimbursement doesn't completely recover all of your cost.
Okay. And I thought we might revisit insurance tonight, but I don't think I want to do that. Just as a statement, insurance money we can give or take away year by year, but anything we add on to pay is forever. And that was the real sticking point last week when we talked about, do we want to do insurance or do we want to do pay? When we looked at that bottom line as far as going across our income into the surplus to pay for insurance. So I'm willing to let it sit as it was as we go forward. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Ms. Sullins.
Thank you, President Hogg. Ms. Powell, I want to thank you also. It's wonderful when you have these collaborative budgets because it's something that touches literally everyone in the community. But the collaborative nature of this budget certainly doesn't make it any easier to produce. And year after year, you bring all of the people together and bring very cohesive reports to us to help us as a team make the best decisions. And I appreciate your work, your staff's work, very, very much. I wanted to, you mentioned briefly a budget amendment, and I just wanted to share that I am certainly comfortable with that concept. You know, we never really end budgeting, and we never, needs appear during the year, and, I don't have a problem at all when we are in a very comfortable position to make investments, strategic investments, or maybe mandatory ones like the counseling one you mentioned. But strategic investments, to me, I think particularly things that would offer employees flexibility or drive costs down of health care. And maybe we'll know more this fall when the entire state and nation know more, and maybe we'd have an opportunity to look at something there, or security, or the facilities audit, or the curriculum audit may all present things that would be make the time right for a strategic investment without waiting the whole year. So I'd like to encourage the administration that, as far as I think a budget amendment can be very healthy, and appreciate the work that we've done here. I think it's solid. Certainly like the highlights. We've covered a lot of territory. Thank you, Ms. Bell.
Thank you, Ms. Sullins. Mr. Pompa.
Thank you, President Hogg. Great job. Ms. Powell, as always, I think that especially with all our creative ideas and creative energy that we have as a board, that's probably been a little bit different than in years past. You know, I've enjoyed this process, especially the thoughtfulness that we put at the beginning of the budget process, so that we are involved in establishing the expectations, the assumptions that we're making, and those kinds of things that really drive this budget. As I look at this budget, first I have just a couple of quick, actually one question. Did we already include some of the strategic plan costs in the future? What we kind of expect that we're going to have, or are those too difficult to predict, and so there's none of that included?
Into the forecast?
Into the forecast?
No,
Okay.
there's not, because we have not yet defined what those activities will be for that third year.
Did you, some of the money that we have in there now, I think $4.1 million.
4.3.
4.3 strategic plan, has that been pulled out of next year? Since that was a one-time expense
Yes, right,
only?
exactly.
Okay.
So it is in the budget for 13-14.
Mm-hmm.
When we do the forecast for 14-15, those costs were all subtracted out.
Okay, so just to be clear then, and we don't know what those expenses are going to be, but we know there are going to be expenses related to our strategic plan, and that's one of the things I'm really proud of, that we didn't create a strategic plan that's sitting on a shelf collecting dust, but that we're actually working it, and in working it, we're going to have to fund it. And so we know that in the future, we're still going to have to build in some expenses. We don't know what they are, but there's going to be some expenses. And so as I look at, going out next year, we know we're going to show a deficit because we're building that school, and the following year, we're showing about $7 million that we have to play with. However, we could use a good chunk of that to execute, part of our strategic plan.
Yes, and I guess one other comment I would make is, there are some of the earlier items in the strategic plan are the bigger ticket items. And so I don't know, and we certainly haven't begun to draft what the activities would look like in year 3, but the $4.3 million for this upcoming year takes care of some of the real big ticket items.
Sure.
So.
We have enough in our hands just dealing with what we're trying to do this year
Yes.
right now. I understand that for sure. As I look at this budget, and I agree that the curriculum assessment and the facilities study are probably going to present some opportunities for us to make some immediate investments into those areas. Obviously, the curriculum, it's how we teach the students. And so we have to address those needs as they are identified. And facility study, I have a feeling there's going to be some deferred maintenance issues in there that may be to the point of that we have to address immediately. I can tell you every time I drive into some of the schools and I'm hitting the potholes and everything, and I have a low car, and I mean it hurts. And so there's things that we're going to have to address probably relatively quickly. So there's going to be some expenses there. I would agree with you on that. But what I really like about this budget is how well it's aligned with our strategic plan and with our objective of being a premier school district. And when I look at the items where we're spending money, the strategic plan itself and those initiatives, but in addition to that, career tech and dual credit courses, early college, high school implementation, athletics at the junior high, which we believe that engaged students are students that have better achievement levels, you know, in any way we look at it. So, I mean, I think this is great. These are all recommendations from the staff that you really believe are going to help us improve student achievement. And I agree with you. I'm not an expert in education, but I do trust that you guys are, and I appreciate the fact that you've been able to align it very, very clearly with our stated objectives. And I know they're aggressive and they're pretty lofty, but I think we're making huge, huge strides in that direction. So congratulations. That's a great budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pompa. Mr. Hibbs.
Ms. Powell, great job to you and your staff. You guys are always come back and just show how premier you are, yourself and the staff, and we appreciate that very much. President Hogg, for the budget summary, I do believe that I would like to, last week we voted to go only up to 15 years. I would like to see us extend that out for the additional cost from 16 to 20. I think we have to make a motion to amend what we approved last week. Is that not correct?
What you could do, Mr. Hibbs, is if we make a motion for the whole budget to include the salary adjustment to 16 to 20 years, then you could do it all as one motion, or you could break it out either which way.
No, I think if we can just add it into it, that's the easiest way of going.
When someone makes a motion, I think that would be a great idea to include.
Are we ready for a motion? Good. I would motion that we accept the proposed 2013-2014 budget that's brought to us by our administration. I would like to have added in that we do the equity adjustment through the year 20.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
We have a motion by Mr. Hibbs and a second. Any discussion? I have one quick thing, Ms. Powell, just because I didn't get to make a comment real quick. On the market study that you mentioned, is that market study also going to include insurance comparison as a total compensation package?
Was not originally intended to, and we can certainly put that into the specs to see if the vendor can provide that information to us.
I guess the question, we know what most of them that are using TRS Active Care are paying, but some of the districts that we compete with, definitely, especially for principals, they are self-funded, so they do have different insurance costs of what their premiums are going to be paid. Just a question. I figure if we start doing that, if it's a major hassle, we do something different, or we do our own analysis. With that, and Mr. Barron, your comment I thought was very insightful. On insurance in the future, you're right. The insurance instead of salary can be adjusted in future years, and I think it leads more to that discussion that after the market study, after some discussion of what's happening with healthcare exchanges, the idea of some other form of reimbursement is something that can then be added to maybe not just one employee, but all employees, because no matter what, in 2014, every single employee has to have insurance. Doesn't matter who you are. It's a federal law. Now, the IRS is going to regulate it, so we'll see how much that works. But it is a federal law. Every person does have to have insurance starting January 1, 2014. So I think exploring in the fall, once we know more of healthcare exchanges, once we know more of the market study, I think finding those options, as some of my colleagues discussed, of how do we adjust the insurance, because this is something that affects all of our employees as part of their total compensation package, is really how we need to look at this entire process. So I think it was very insightful, Mr. Barron, of how you said that. That is all I have. With that, we have a motion by Mr. Hibbs and a second by Mr. Pompa. Seeing no further discussion, would all trustees please vote? Hitting the wrong buttons. 5 trustees present, all 5 trustees posing in the affirmative. Ms. Pena and Mr. Reich are out on travel this week, so they couldn't be here. Ms. Powell, Dr. Cavazos, We made it through another budget
We did.
season. Thank you, once again, thank you all for your thorough and hard work. Next up on the item for action, we have consider resolution regarding 925 Preakness, all of Lot 1, Block 1 of Stewart Addition, and addition to the City of Grand Prairie. At this time, I would be willing to take a motion or discussion from one of my colleagues. Move for approval. Just say move.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of considering resolution for 925 Preakness, all of Lot 1. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All trustees present voting in the affirmative. Resolution passed. Next, we have action item C. Consider resolution regarding northeast corner of Timber Oaks, Prairie Hill Lane, Grand Prairie, Texas. Prairie Oaks Park Addition, Block C, Lot 1R1, determining necessity of acquisition of property and authorizing and ratifying offers to purchase.
Move for approval.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Hibbs.
And I'll second that one.
We have a motion by Mr. Hibbs and a second by Mr. Behring. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. All trustees present voting in the affirmative. Next, we move on to our consent agenda. This time, I call someone we haven't seen much tonight,
Very long time.
our CFO, Ms. Cindy Powell. Ms. Powell.
Thank you. President Hogg, board members, Dr. Cavazos. In terms of bids this evening, the administration is asking that we pull bid number 13-95 from the consent agenda for further evaluation, and we will bring it back to the board for consideration at a future meeting. There are 4 bids left then that are presented this evening for your consideration, and in all cases, we recommend the lowest bids meeting specifications and the bids that represent the best value to the district. We also have a number of donations to report this evening. Our schools have received donations from the following individuals and organizations: Edwin Lou Javius, Arlington High School Orchestra Booster Club, the Arlington High School Band Booster Club, Southside Bank, Arlington High School Golf Booster Club, the Arlington High School Baseball Booster Club, Arlington High School Boys Basketball Booster Club, Sarah and Jeffrey Dewar, Kathy Havens, Robert Greenberg and Betsy Lyons, Carol Hagan and Mark Moore, J.W. and Carol Harrington, Judy Litherland, Douglas Barland, the Arlington High School Alumni Association, James and Angela Collins, Intersport, Bowie High School Football Booster Club, Jerry and Becky McCullough, Petsky Home Account, Lamar High School Baseball Booster Club, Comerica Bank, Walmart, James and Mary Phillips, Lamar High School Basketball Booster Club, Lamar High School Band Booster Club, Texas Health Arlington Memorial Hospital, Martin High School Baseball Booster Club, Service Property Management, the Martin High School Cheerleader Booster Club, Martin High School Boys Basketball Booster Club, Martin High School Orchestra Booster Club, Martin High School Volleyball Booster Club, Martin High School Softball Booster Club, Arlington Kiwanis Foundation, Harmon Jacobs, Martin High School Girls Soccer Booster Club, the Martin High School FFA Booster Club, Best Team Pneumatics, the Martin High School Sundancers Booster Club, Laura Jones, Texas Senior Volleyball Association, the Kimball Art Museum, Sam Houston High School Band Booster Club, the Seguin High School Cheerleader Booster Club, Arlington West Rotary Scholarship Fund, the Bailey Junior High School Band Booster Club, Safeway, Bowles Junior High School Band Booster Club, the Shackelford Junior High School PTA, J.P. Morgan Chase Foundation, Don Painter Photography, Corey Elementary School PTA, Farrell Elementary PTA, the Farrell Elementary School Student Council, Yen Vo, Kona Ice Lake, Arlington, Life Touch National School Studios, Dallas Basketball Limited, the North Arlington Education Alliance, Great American Life Insurance, Moore Elementary School PTA, Dr. Charles Varvarin, Willie Greathouse, Coca-Cola, Sherrod Elementary School PTA, the Short Elementary School PTA, Pantego Lions Foundation, the Arlington Women's Club Travel Department, Swift Elementary School PTA, the West Elementary School PTA. So the total donations presented for consideration this evening are $106,991, which brings our year-to-date total to $1,122,501. And there will be one more report next week on this fiscal year. So.
Thank you, Ms. Powell, and you can always take as long as you would like when it's donations. And I have to thank the community for their generous donations, and as you can see, the donations exceeded this year than they did last year, so that's always a positive because we can't do it without our community. At this time, I'd accept a motion for the consent agenda with the exception of 1395 that has been pulled.
I'll move to accept the consent with the exception of 13-95, which was pulled.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Barron, a second by Ms. Solons. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Motion passes 5-0. All trustees present voting in the affirmative. Thank you, Ms. Powell. Next, we'll move on to our discussion items. First up for discussion this evening is discussion item A, facilities assessment update and options for delivering the final report with a community engagement component. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg. And as you know, a foundational piece of our strategic plan includes a comprehensive facility assessment across the district for all our facilities. And so this evening, the consultant will share with us the progress of that facility assessment as well as some options in moving forward. So Cindy will introduce that. Thank you.
Thank you. And as Dr. Cavazos just mentioned, we are in the midst of our facility assessment, and we have with us this evening two gentlemen who are going to discuss the progress with us and how we might move forward with receiving the report on this project. We have with us this evening from Jacobs Project Management, Casey Morris, who will give us an update on the facility assessment itself and the work that they've done to date. We also have David Sturtz of DeJong Richter. That is a firm that's a partner with Jacobs on this project, and David is going to visit with us about the next steps and options we have for receiving the report either with or without a community engagement component. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Casey Morris.
Thank you, Ms. Powell, President Hogg, Dr. Cavazos, and board. I'm just going to talk briefly about where we are in this process. I think I was here in December of last year to get this thing kind of kicked off, and we've been working pretty diligently to move through the process and move through your schools. As part of our effort, we're updating all the CAD plans that the district possesses. We're marking up floor plans and getting room uses and all the various things onto paper so that we can put that into the CAD plans and deliver that as part of the process. The first round is done, meaning we've made our initial walkthroughs and marked those up. We are currently working to update the plans. We're doing this for all schools and administrative facilities. As this assessment draws to a close, those drawings will be finalized sometime this summer. We'll have that piece wrapped up. Educational adequacy assessments were completed in April. We went through the following list, or the displayed list of schools there: 51 elementaries, 12 junior highs, 6 high schools, and 4 alternative schools, and inventoried those for educational adequacy components that we will then compare to standards that we are in the process of developing with the district, with staff help and curriculum experts within the district and that sort of thing. We're developing those standards to use in that educational adequacy evaluation. The ADA assessments, we have an accessibility consultant that is in the facilities now. He is working with his teams and determining where accessibility issues exist. Those laws tend to change with handicap access and that sort of thing, and he's doing a pretty thorough job of getting through the schools and determining where we're deficient with regards to accessibility for impaired students. He's about 50% complete as of today. The condition assessment, the architects and engineers hit the schools last week. I believe we started this, so we're about a week and a half, nearly 2 full weeks in. We've done 18 schools. That's expected to run through early August. We'll then compile results. We're entering that data now and processing it, and as we get to the end of that exercise, we'll start to pull all that together in order to start developing options and a plan going forward for what the district might want to do to address the needs across the facilities. As Ms. Powell mentioned, we've got David Sturtz here with DeJong Richter. He's going to talk to you briefly about what that process may look like, both doing it internally or bringing community in and having a full community engagement function to help determine the path for the schools going forward.
you, Casey. Thank you all again. My name is David Sarth with Young Richter, Project Director with the company, and I'm going to go over again the two options that you have before you for your development of the facilities master plan. One with a community engagement component, one without. And so what you see before you is what we call our 12-step program for facility master planning, and the first two are the same irrespective of the options that you choose. The first step, of course, is to get into the planning, data collection, number two, and it concludes with a board presentation. You don't need to bother about trying to read all that fine print right there. I'm going to go through each slide independently, so you don't need to pull out your binoculars. In this process that we recommend, there are 6 steering committee meetings. The steering committee I'll describe in a moment. These are about 2 to 3 hour long meetings that help guide the process through with the data as it's sourced to discuss, punctuated by 2 community dialogues, which with the district the size of Arlington, you may want to have multiple in different planning areas in order to have more thorough community participation. With board updates and executive committee sessions with Dr. Cavazos and his cabinet along the way. So to start with and discuss the first 2 sessions, which are really in process as we speak. The plan for planning is a process, not an event, and that's when we set the deadlines for the program, for the planning. We set the deliverables and what the expectations are for ourselves and for all parties. And should we proceed with the option to go with community engagement at this stage as well, over the summer we would decide upon a steering committee. And what we do for that is, having done over 300 of these facility master plans around the country in over 1,000 districts that we've worked with, what we recommend is that we present a recommended composition for a steering committee. We don't predetermine or don't think that the list should be predetermined as to who would participate, but rather what categories. We want, of course, a board member or 2. We want your district to have principals and teachers and parents and even students, community members, maybe clergy, civic organizational leaders, higher education, career, local community college leaders, and that kind of thing. We're talking about 40-ish folks, give or take, that we then you distribute out to them, and then those institutions pick their participants, which gives a sense of transparency, openness, that nothing's being predetermined in a smoke-filled room as to what the options are going to be, but rather it's really seeking the community's input. The data collection with Casey, you mentioned the nuts and bolts that are being collected as far as the data on the school facility condition. We're also going to gather information regarding enrollment projections and analyzing those respective to your building's capacity. You see there a sample of what a cohort group that's large going through a district looks like, and you can see below a GIS rendition or geographic information systems of how that population is shifting the center of gravity throughout a community, has impacts on your facilities planning, where schools are going to be, what the capacity is going to need to be in various planning areas within your district, and when. So at the end of by the end of the second phase here, we have a thorough collection of data. This is at the end of this summer, irrespective of the option that you choose. We're going to have a thorough collection of all the data that we need to move ahead with your facility planning for your final recommended options. Now, if you decide to go with the current option, which has been already approved, which is to proceed without community engagement, the deliverable will be a list of recommended options, which I'll explain in the near the final slide, that would guide your facilities, each of your facilities for the next 5 to 10 plus years. And that would be done all internally between our team, Casey with Jacobs, and with Dr. Cavazos and his cabinet. I'd say your pro on that side, your benefit is that's done a little bit sooner, done by the end of October. You go with the full community engagement, it's going to go through beginning mid of January. Now, proceeding with the community engagement, I'll talk about some of the benefits here in a subsequent slide. But what we would begin with is that steering committee that has been assembled would meet for the first time, and our team would deliver the background report, show the data. The steering committee would then review that data and let us know, is there anything that we're missing? These are folks that are represent a broad spectrum of your district, and they're going to maybe have some institutional knowledge that we don't. And so they're going to provide, well, I think you might be missing this data. Go research this. And so they're going to review our report, and then by the second steering committee, we will have researched that and included it pending filtered through the executive committee to make sure that we're on track, to make sure that we have all the data pieces that we need. And in that second steering committee, again, we will look at creating a questionnaire in advance of the first community dialogue. And in the community dialogues, what we're looking to do is not have an open mic night. We're not allowing the loudest voices to have the most time. And the idea of the community dialogue is to gather as much data as you can from your community as they review the same facts that we have. Because in a comprehensive plan, your friend is everybody dialoguing with the same data, your enemy is everybody choosing their own data points to pick from, and operating and planning in silos and never talking to each other. So what we do is we gather solid data, comprehensive data. We then we funnel that conversation for all parties through that same data, so we're talking about the same reality. And in this community dialogue, we're going to begin with a brief futures conference to give the community a perspective on where education is going, broadly speaking, forces that are affecting changes in education. In order to get the thinking to move at a strategic level and maybe beyond some of the technical, tactical things that day to day we're concerned about. Is the water fountain clean? Does my kid have a whiteboard in their classroom? And those are important, but we're talking higher level at this point. We'll get to the nuts and bolts later. So, and we'll be talking about program delivery options, such as STEM, STEAM. I know Mr. Anderson made the legislative update. There are decisions are going to have to be made regarding program career tech options, regarding virtual schooling. So what kind of, how might program delivery shift over the course of the life of these facilities that may change? Because when you build a new building, you're looking at that building being there for 30, 40, 50 plus years. How must that building be designed in order to accommodate changes that we really just have a vague idea where they're going, but to plan strategically in our facilities so they don't hinder our education but support it. Looking at school size, class size, what is the community input, broad spectrum on class sizes and school sizes moving into the future? This questionnaire will be multilingual. It will be online, so if folks aren't able to attend this meeting, that they're able to participate either way. And we have individual and small group questionnaires. We break community members up into groups of 6, 7, 8 at a table to work on small groups. We break them up and so that they're dialoguing with folks they didn't come in with, and so they're forced to articulate positions. If they have something that they're advocating for, they're advocating based on the data that we're presenting with folks who maybe aren't in the same choir, so to speak. Then after the first community dialogue, we're going to come and meet with Dr. Cavazos and his cabinet to present the results of that first community dialogue and to start to frame how the facilities options work sessions will proceed from there. We will then have an approved educational framework by the time we're done with that executive committee session, where we take the community's input upon their interests and tolerance and input on educational framework questions such as program delivery options, school size, class size, et cetera, and then that will be approved by the executive cabinet. All happening between September and October. Now, where some of the efficiency gains come in doing a community engagement process like this is that a lot of these processes you're going to have to do anyway. A bond committee, say we do option A, we get done with the facilities options by the end of October. At that point, then any kind of communications efforts, public relations efforts regarding the bond issues and to come in the future would of course happen after that. And that would be done, the planning would be done in-house. It would not be done with the community's input throughout the process. So it would be presenting the package in its completed form to the community and a public relations component. And what we're doing here is we would actually recommend that your folks from technology, from transportation, curriculum, and other folks that would be relevant to master planning be involved in that steering committee so that the process is comprehensive, so that people aren't planning in silos, so that we're doing this all at the same time, because technological planning, technology planning impacts facilities planning, impacts curriculum planning, which impacts transportation, and doing it all at once, one process saves redundancies and saves us from doing things, and then coming in with different data and coming in not round peg, square hole. So we're looking for efficiency gains through this process as well. The options packet development is where we move from 10,000 feet to ground level. And up to this point, we've been looking at all the background data report. We've been gathering broad spectrum educational framework data questions and framework from the community and ultimately from the executive cabinet. And now we're taking that feedback and we're starting to develop specific options. What specifically are options for each of the individual schools based primarily upon the data? That's the first layer. Everybody's filtering through that data. The second is all of the community feedback, the dialogue, the steering committee work that has gone on for the 2 meetings prior to this, the executive committee, and of course board direction. And so we're using all of that information plus our experience in having done quite a number of these to lay out different options. And we call it the war room. Everybody's working around tables and we're bouncing back different options for the schools based upon the data. Is the school declining in enrollment? Is it growing? What's the capacity? What's the, how's the condition index on this as far as recuperating costs? What's it going to be? How does the deficiencies there affect our planning for this school's viability in the future? So on and so forth. We then proceed, that's a first meeting. These are about 3 hours long. These are a little longer than normal. The fourth meeting there is where we take the initial run through of those draft options and we put it together into a packet for all the schools. And that packet then, with approval from the executive committee, goes to the community. Now the community, when they're meeting again, they're looking again at the background report. And the background report as it pertains to specific options that have been worked out in the steering committee for each of these facilities. And they're going to provide us feedback on those, individually and small groups, again, the same way. And they're going to have work sessions of their own there, and then post up all the results on the wall. We're going to take all that data, all of their information, we're going to analyze it, and then bring it back to the executive cabinet, say this is what your community was saying about the options. At that point, again, Dr. Cavazos and company will take all of the various options, because there's a lot, and provide strategic direction for the steering committee to complete its work. And the completed work after another 2 community steering committee meetings after the second community dialogue will be a list of recommended options. And these recommended options you see up here, this is from a recent district that we worked with up in Illinois. You'll have an option up at the top for a particular middle school, a narrative explanation of that option. You'll have the strengths and challenges for that particular option, because every option has its strengths and everyone has its challenges. This one is recommended for a reason, and that reason is highlighted below in print that you can't read at this point up on the screen. But what that is that's the data that from the background report and from the surveys, but primarily from the background report that supports why that decision was chosen as the recommended, with GIS data to spatially present the recommended option for further comprehension. And well, when we're all done with the list of the recommended options, that is presented back to Dr. Cavazos for final approval by the cabinet, and then to bring to you as a board to say, here's the recommended options that we, the executive committee, have vetted. The steering committee has met 6 times to create with the consultant who's an expert in this particular field, with your community dialogue and feedback. So with that, those are your 2 options. And again, there's a pro-con here as far as initial time as when you get those options as to which one you choose, with or without engagement. But again, we would contend that considering the other options that you need to pursue with bond issuance, that this would actually encompass some of what you already need to do. So with that, I'm going to invite any questions that you may have or comments, and of course, please, Casey has lead on this, please direct questions to him as well.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions from board members at this time? Mr. Pompa.
Do we have a cost component to this? Has that been presented to the administration, or is this already, if we choose to do the community input piece?
Okay.
I see Ms. Powell standing up.
When we did the RFQ for the facility assessment, that was a component that they provided to us. So we have a proposed cost from them, $102,770 for this. And so that was an option we did not act on originally. We weren't sure how we would want to proceed with that, but they have given us that proposal. And I guess, the comment I would make too is that the district has historically had a bond advisory committee. What they're proposing is the community engagement that we typically have gotten through a bond advisory process. This would be a process they would lead instead to get that same community input in a structured process that they lead for us.
Well, that begs the question, we just passed a budget.
And this
is it in there already?
It is,
Okay.
because it's one of the activities in the strategic plan. So
Okay.
we have built the $102,770
Okay.
is part of the $4.3 million of strategic plan activities that is in
I
the
had a feeling
budget.
you had it already
Yeah.
included. But just,
We did.
Just making sure. I value I want to get the results already. This has been a long process. But I was like, I want to know already. We started back in December. We knew, with 72 campuses, it was going to take, it was a task, obviously. And, but this is going to be a big piece of our plan to address those physical issues at 10 million square feet of real estate that we have under management, from what Bob mentioned to me. So I would tend to think it'd be a good thing to get the community input. I think that would empower the community in terms of they have a say in what their school buildings look like. It's their buildings, it's their school district, and it's they who hear the comments of their friends when they go visit their schools or when they drive by their school, and whether it's good or bad, they're the ones that get it. And so I think it's probably a good idea. And then really so that whenever we go to decide what we're going to do, we have a group of people that are supporting it because it's, they had input in their plan. So I'd probably tend to lean towards doing the option of the community involvement, but I'd like to hear what the rest of my colleagues have to say on that.
Thank you, Mr. Pompa. Ms. Sullins.
Thank you, President Hogg. As a former bond advisory committee member with Mr. Hibbs, and I believe Mr. Carlisle, that was your first year also with the district, and Ms. Powell and Tony, we were there, and this is outstanding tool. It's very, very needed. Just can tell you from our experience that summer, it was an excellent bond advisory committee, but this tool will allow us to be much more strategic, further reaching. I also like the community approach, because I believe that we're going to go there anyway, and right. And I think that it would. Gosh, what a difference a few years makes in how we'll be putting together not only maybe this bond package, but also a longer-term vision for investments along the way. I'm ready to go.
Ms. Sullins, Mr. Pompa, I don't think there's any discussion over whether we're going to have community engagement or not. I don't think this board's done anything without community input, anything especially this drastic. I think the discussion is whether we use your firm or do it as how we've historically. I definitely see the advantages for utilizing this program. It's a very structured program. I think it keeps a little more structure. I think it also, I appreciate your point of true transparency from the public of all different groups.
Sure.
For a bond advisory committee. So from that perspective, I have to tell you, I'm leaning towards it. Seeing no other lights, I would tell the trustees, this is just a discussion item tonight. We can place this on the agenda next week for action if we'd like, but tonight it is just a discussion item. So with that,
President Hogg,
yeah, Mr. Papa.
I would only just I'd like to hear a little bit more feedback from the staff on this, from Mr. Carlisle, not necessarily tonight, but, you know, help us think through this because, again, we value the community input very much, but at the same time, I know this factors into your timeline in terms of what we're doing and with these facilities and everything, so.
And Mr. Papa, a little birdie just whispered in my ear that staff is fully prepared to give their feedback tonight, if you'd like to go ahead and hear that tonight.
If it's a discussion item, let's go ahead and hear it. Mr. Carlisle, you want to come up and visit with us for a little bit?
Well, from my perspective, this is exactly what we need to do. If we stop if we stop in the middle of the process, and that's the way I see it, then we form a bond advisory committee, then we really have to start from the beginning with them again. They weren't involved in the process to begin with. So I think that this undoubtedly is the best way to do it, because then we've got people that are, you know, we can call it a steering committee, we can call it whatever we want to call it. But the net result is going to be the same as we had with the Bond Advisory Committee in 2009. But the advantage to this is I think it gets more community involvement, one, and two, we don't have to then begin the process really over again when we finish the data collection and we say goodbye to the consultant. And so, and that's going to be, I think that would lengthen the process even more if we did that. So I'm truly a proponent of using the community engagement piece. I think it is the perfect thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle.
Ms. Solons, before you go, can I ask one question on this? Does this community piece, does it also, as part of our bond advisory committee, as Ms. Solons served on it and the rest, you know, Mr. Hibbs was chair. Well, I was getting there. I was saying she served in your chair. And the board, we proposed the bond last time. Does it include some of the demographic studies that we'll do to see, and some surveys of the public to see what's tolerable by the public and what we think the right amount is for a potential bond, if a bond will pass, that we've done in the past?
I think maybe that would be something that we can get, I forgot his name, David, or to take a look at, right?
Because I think it's nice. This recommendation may come back and say, you need $30 trillion worth of materials.
Well, exactly.
But the public will only tolerate $20 trillion worth
yeah.
of new
and at some
facilities.
point, the beauty of having the all of this data we have, we'll be able to manipulate that data and come up with any kind of capital planning proposal that we would, you know, capital funding that we would need. So we might, and I think that's the process that we will go through. You know, we might go through 4 or 5 different capital planning pieces before we land on what finally the community will support and what we think we need to do.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Ms. Solons.
Thank you, President Hogg. And I did want to clarify, you had a good point on the community engagement. Of course, this district always invites community engagement, but I was particularly interested in this community engagement structure in this bond committee, because I think it also provides a great safety net that the bond advisory committee does a tremendous job, but doesn't have the full overview, doesn't have the full set of data, doesn't have understand the needs of a very large district with a lot of needs. So I'm a proponent of that community engagement structure piece that you just described. I think it will produce the very best result and give the community even a broader access to weigh in than we've done in the past. So I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solons. I think hearing from the board, and thank you, Mr. Carlisle, I think hearing from the board, we definitely probably should put this for possible potential action and discussion next week. With that, I thank our friends from Jacobs and to Jean Richter. Please keep working very, very diligently. Mainly I'm looking at our friends from Jacobs. All right. Thank you, guys. Next up, discussion item B, we have Spring 2013 Graduating Seniors Survey results. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg. And again, another component of our strategic plan is to survey our students, in this case our graduating seniors, about their experience in school and how they've navigated through the process and give us some feedback for improvement. So at this point, I call up consultants from Gibson. Come on up and give us some information about the results.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Amy Rappaport. I think this is my first time meeting many of you. I am excited to be here because I have results, and I, like you, like having results. This is the fun part. This is when we get to share with you what we found after all of the effort that we went through to collect this data. And I do need to extend thanks to Dr. Carter, who we worked with very closely, and all of your staff in your high schools, and all of your students who took the time to respond. And let's see, are we on here? Okay, great.
I can't get into slideshow.
That's okay, I got it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you guys brought us in to obtain measures related to your strategic plan, and as we heard earlier, you're right, it's not collecting dust. You're using it to guide the questions that you ask to make the decisions that you want to make, so you have data behind those decisions. And so we came in to do a survey of your graduating senior class, and we were positioned to ask about 5 main primary areas of measurement, metrics that align to 5 areas of the strategic plan that you pointed to measuring among your senior class. And so the 5 areas that we were targeting, the first was about how seniors in the district perceive the quality of their education and the instructional practices that were used in their classes. We were measuring the extent to which the district is creating an atmosphere that supports lifelong learning. We were measuring students' preparation for college and the workforce. And we were measuring there's some quality of facilities. A lot of what I've heard tonight has sort of triangulated with some of the things that we were measuring in our survey, which I think is really great. And I heard a lot about facilities. You'll hear a little bit of that from me tonight. And finally, we were measuring school safety and a respectful environment. I think it's important to say a couple of things before I'm going to try to get to results as quickly as I can, but the goal of this, yes, is to get data in each of these areas, to give you information to make decisions, but it's also to establish a baseline measurement. And I think that's really important because as you make decisions over the next couple of years and you implement initiatives and you put in programs, if you continue to measure these things over time, you'll be able to measure change. And that's going to be very informative for you as you move forward. The other thing I want to stress is that the data I have for you tonight is just one data point, and I think you have a lot of other data points to triangulate against. You're going to have survey results reported from other vendors, parent surveys, staff surveys. I know you have a facilities audit, you have a curriculum audit, and I think from what I've already heard tonight, there's already a lot of alignment there going on. So I need to spend a few minutes talking about how we measured each of these areas, because then when we get to the results, it'll help you sort of follow along with what I have to show you. So to measure seniors' perceptions of the quality of education and the alignment with instructional practices, we asked them about, what was the quality of their instruction in specific content areas. And then we met with your staff, your curriculum staff, and we found out what are the instructional strategies you want to see in your classroom. And so we were able to directly ask students about their experiences with those instructional strategies. And that gave us really good insight into whether or not teachers are doing the kinds of things that your curriculum staff want to see in the classroom. We also asked questions that tap student engagement, and so we're able to get a measure of how engaged students were in their courses. And then at the end of the day, we asked them, how prepared do you feel? How prepared do you feel for expressing yourself in writing? How prepared do you feel for working with others? And how prepared do you feel for the next steps that come after high school? In the section on lifelong learning, we wanted to be careful not to measure the percentage of your students who identify as lifelong learners, but we wanted to measure the extent to which the district is fostering an environment that promotes lifelong learning. And so what we did here, and this was a little bit, we weren't really sure how to do this, so we threw out a bunch of items and asked students to rate those items. And what you'll see later is we took some statistical methods to assess whether or not those items really formed a construct of interest, and they did, and so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. Preparation for college and the workforce. This we operationalized in terms of, are students doing the activities that they need to be doing as precursors for going to college? Are they taking the SAT? Are they applying for schools? Are they taking AP classes, IB classes? Are they applying for scholarships? Are they going to the Go Centers? Are they doing the kinds of things that are going to help them get into college? And we also asked specifically about 4 things that school counselors help them with, so we can get a measure of the extent to which students are utilizing counseling services. And then we had a list of things that students can do to help them with their plans for after school, and some of them were college related and some of them were workforce related. And then we had a bunch of items that staff, so do you get support, did you get encouragement from adults in your school in these areas? The facilities section was very straightforward. We had a list of items that asked how often were these things true for you in your school? School cleanliness, functionality of equipment, space, adequacy of resources, maintenance, grounds, and buildings. And the fifth area was about school safety and respect. And this one, there's a lot of research in this area, and so there are a lot of existing measures on school safety, so we were able to borrow some items from existing measures. We had to modify them in some cases. And there were sort of 3 constructs there. There was safety, there was respectful actions, like my friends stop bullying if they see it happen, and respectful actions was teachers here respect me, students respect each other, and protective actions where I would stop bullying if I saw it happen, things like that. And then we asked them very straightforward, how safe do you feel in 7 areas of the school? We also have some background characteristics. We requested data from the administrative records on students' demographic characteristics and have all of their data linked to their ethnicity, their GPA, their length of time in the district, and then indicators for whether they're special ed, free reduced price lunch, limited English proficient, et cetera. So we had a 2-week survey window. We targeted all seniors in all high schools. We didn't leave anybody out. We didn't take a sampling approach. We tried to get everybody. And again, I have to really commend your high school staff. We assigned a liaison was volunteered, and we worked with that person to get to all of the seniors. We created specific teacher packets. Inside every teacher's packet were envelopes for each of their classes. Inside that were instructions, scripts, labels for every single solitary student. There was a label with a code and the URL for them to go to the computer lab and log in and access the survey. The liaisons helped schedule the computer labs, and it was an incredible effort, and I really am very appreciative for that. We got an almost 80% response rate, which I have to put in context for you. There are school districts out there that don't even get that, and they've been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years, and this is the first time your district ever did this. So it's really a very impressive response rate. We didn't just take all of those responses at face value. We did spend some time looking at them and looking for, teenagers being teenagers and trying to undermine our efforts. And we did find what we call exaggerators, 87 of them that we eliminated from the data set. They said yes to everything or they said no to everything, and we dropped them from the analytic sample. We found a few that completed it, under a minute, which is impossible. And only 6 of the 3,000 were completed after school hours, so we figured that was an anomaly and wanted to get rid of anything that may have been, not quite clean. So our final analytic sample was almost 3,000 students. Our response rates by school, you'll see that average % response rate that I showed you was pretty consistent across all of the schools, very impressive response rates for each of the schools. Turning Point only had 8 students respond. I know that's 57% of the seniors though. But because of that small number, when I show you campus level results, I'm not going to be showing Turning Point just because it was such a small number of students. We looked at the characteristics, the demographic characteristics of the students who responded, and it was very comparable to the overall district. So whatever the demographic makeup of the district was, that was represented in the sample of respondents. And we did that not only for the district as a whole, but school by school. And basically what this tells us is that the results are generalizable to the larger population. We have a relatively unbiased sample in our survey sample. So we felt really good about that. Okay, results, yay. Quality of instructional practices. And again, there was a quality piece and then there was an alignment of instructional practices piece. And I'm going to go through each one of these in turn. So these questions asked very straightforward, what was the quality of the instruction that you received in each of these areas? And this table here shows you the percent of students who said it was good or excellent. And I want to point out 2 things in this graph. The color coding you can look at from top to bottom in terms of green being good, orange and red being less good, and you can see the higher scores for social studies, English, writing, and science are sort of in the middle, languages other than English, and then math is at the bottom. So going top to bottom, you can see that sort of green to orangey red. And that's important. That tells you you've got really good feedback on your social studies and English. You've got some, noticeably lower scores there in math. But the other thing you can do is go left to right, and you can look within a subject area at anything that pops out at a particular school. So there's the social studies and English being high and the math and languages being low. But here you can see in a subject area that's getting pretty good response from your students, you have a school that has a particularly sort of standout lower score. And left to right, again, here's a school with a particularly high score, where the average district 81% on average said English was good or excellent. You have 87% in Sam Houston saying their English instruction is excellent. So there's a lot of data in this graph. I don't have a lot of time tonight, and I have a lot of results, so I'm going to keep going. But you can spend a lot of time looking at any one of these slides. This was a particularly low number here for Arlington High School in math. Here's where we asked them about instructional strategies. We said, for you in high school, how true was it that teachers held your attention, that you had choice in demonstrating knowledge, that you could show what you knew in writing? And we asked it separately for every subject area so that the results would be more actionable for you. So you'd be able to know in certain subjects you're having higher or lower responses in those areas. And what this shows you several things. Some things stand out. What stands out to me right off the bat is that in every single instructional strategy, you're getting lower scores in math. That jumps out. Another thing that jumps out is that how often did you have the chance to show what you know in writing? And for all of the subject areas except for English, these are on the low side. And the other sort of, if you step back from this and look at the big picture, a score of a 3 is most of the time. So it would be pretty cool if most of your students were saying most of the time to most of these items. So that red line is showing you just that there's room for growth there, that you can get a little bit more up there. These questions I'm calling engagement, they're things that you'd like that should reflect student engagement, that show you that students are engaged. And here you can see again, the classes were boring is in red because it's a negative statement while all the other statements are positive statements. The majority, more than half of people responding to the survey said to these positive items, never or sometimes. So I enjoy learning, never or sometimes. I was given opportunities to use technology, never or sometimes. You have more than half are saying never or sometimes. You want it to be the other way. You want them to be on the other side saying most of the time or always. So this is a good baseline place for you, I think, for you to see where you are and for it to sort of highlight engagement as a possible issue to focus improvements. And finally, those questions about how prepared did you feel? Again, this to me, what jumps out at me here is this express myself in writing as being low. So low, this was a mean score on a scale of 1 to 4, strongly disagree to strongly agree. So most kids feel pretty good about high school having prepared them for working with others and to some extent next steps after graduation, but you've got much lower mean scores on expressing myself in writing. And that triangulates with the findings I showed you before about expressing myself in writing was a strategy that was not as present. So when we sort of take all of this together, we think that what really highlights here is math. The lack of a sort of district-wide philosophy for math. And let me just say that, you know, we haven't gone in and done a curriculum audit. I know you have that going on. We don't have all that much information about what you are currently doing. We just have these sort of standalone survey results. So this is sort of some ideas out there, but I know you have a lot of other data points and things to add to this. But there seems to be a need for sort of a common philosophy or a common vision regarding those instructional practices. And it seems when I spoke with your curriculum director, I think, or the assistant to the curriculum director, there was a clear vision for what those instructional practices are, but it's not getting down to the level of the teaching such that the students are reporting that they're engaging in those that they're receiving those strategies on the receiving end. Writing, again, across all content areas, but specifically in math, and again, writing across all content areas. The next set of data that I have for you is on this lifelong learning. So this was the one where we didn't really know exactly what that was, and so we put, I think there were 16 items or 12 items that we came up with, and we asked students, to what extent does your school encourage you to pursue topics that interest you, to be curious, to get excited about learning? And we weren't sure that all of those items were necessarily the right items. So what we did is after we had the data, we ran a factor analysis. And all you need to know is that I interpreted those factor analyses, and what it showed was that there were two factors that sort of came out of that. There are clumps of items that hung together, and that sort of, we were measuring something independent and something that was a solid construct, we call it. And there were two. And so one of them I labeled individual. They seem to be things that people do on their own. They pursue topics that interest them. They can be curious. They can get excited about learning, be creative, try new things. And the other construct were the kinds of things that you do with other people. Community service, building leadership, participating in school clubs, becoming involved in mentoring. And all of these items seem to form this construct of lifelong learning. We're calling it lifelong learning. And the other items didn't, so we dropped the other items. And what we did is we created a mean score, two mean scores, one for this individual construct and one for this with others construct. And so we have a mean score for each. And then we ran analyses on the mean scores to tell us something, to be able to look at patterns. And we did an analysis of covariance, which just basically looks at how did each of the schools score on these two constructs, and taking into account some of the demographic differences in the schools. And what we found, there's really not all that much going on. You'll see that the differences are very small here. There's not a lot of variation. This is the first one. These are the individual behaviors. They're pretty high. It's a scale of 1 to 4. It's between 2.8 and 3.0, so it's pretty positive. What I did was I looked at differences between schools and differences from the mean, and what you find is that Sam Houston is significantly higher than the mean on this construct, and Seguin and Lamar are significantly lower on this construct, but you can see that even though it's statistically significant, the size of the difference is small. And the second construct was the with others construct. Again, mostly positive. Arlington and Sam Houston were significantly above the mean. And again, Lamar and Seguin were significantly below the mean. So while the size of the differences are small, it is a pattern. There is a pattern there. And so in terms of recommendations for this area, what we would suggest is that you can look at the responses from Sam Houston, and you can look at the responses from Lamar and Seguin and see where they're different. And I've started to do that for you. So this Get Excited About Learning shows a really big difference. You've got 80% of students at Sam Houston saying that their school, that they agree or strongly agree that their school encourages them to get excited about learning. But you only have 65 and 59% of students agreeing with that statement at Seguin and Lamar. Here's a difference of 11 points for trying new things. And here's a big standout in terms of getting involved in mentoring. So this just gives you some sense of what might be going on at these schools, and that might lead you to make some decisions about maybe some strategies that differentiate Sam Houston that are best practices that maybe can be shared across the district that can help improve across the district. But generally, I thought these findings were pretty positive. I mean, a mean of 3 on a 4-point scale is pretty good. Preparation for college and the workforce. This one was interesting. So across the seniors that responded to the survey, we had 80% who said that they have applied to college. And if you look at what kinds of colleges they're applying to, 24% applied, checked the box that said 2-year college, yes, but they didn't check anything else. And 29% checked the box that said 4-year college, but they didn't check anything else. And then you've got 27% who checked both 2-year and 4-year. And 20% who said that they have not applied. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use these categories, and I'm going to show you other data about students using these categories of descriptives. So if you look at by ethnicity, you'll see some interesting patterns here. The rate of no applications to college among Hispanic students is substantially higher than the rate of not applying among the other student subgroups. And same with being likely to check just the 2-year college. That's a 35% of the Hispanic subgroup indicated 2-year only compared to these other, I think you can see that, right? Yeah, subgroups. We also have high rates of applications among your Black and Asian subgroups, which, you know. And so what was really interesting now is we take those ethnicity by application status and we break it out by GPA. And so I'm going to go through this and show you a couple of things. The first pattern I want to show you is among your highest performing students, you've got mostly people applying to 4-year and 2-year and 4-year colleges. In your students with a B GPA-ish, you see a little bit more of a tendency of the movement to the left of this graph. And among the students with a C grade point average, you see a lot more clumping at the none and the only 2. But the other thing that's really interesting is if you look a little closer, and you start to see very high rates of college application among your African American high-achieving student population, and you also see a lower rate of college applications among your high-achieving Hispanic students. That really jumped out at me. And at the B GPA, that is even more obvious. So you've got these really high-achieving Hispanic students who are applying to colleges at lower rates. Okay, then we had a bunch of items about counseling, and there were 4 possible items. You could check off which of these 4 you did, so the range of, if you sum across those 4, you could have none of them, you can have 4 of them. And so of the students who said they did not apply to college, they're doing on average 2.2 of the 4 things that are involved with counseling. So I met with a counselor to talk about possible careers. I met with a counselor to talk about college. I met with a counselor to talk about where I want to be 10 years from now. Those were the kinds of things that are here. And you see the students applying to 2-year colleges and 2- and 4-year colleges are saying they're participating in those counseling activities a little bit more than the students who are applying only to 4-year colleges, and that's probably intuitive. That's not a surprising finding to me. The student actions, there were some college-bound things, like I applied for scholarships, I went to the Go Center, I went to a college night, I went to a FAFSA event, I took an AP class. And then there were some career-bound items, which is I obtained a technical certification, I took a CTE or a career tech class, I talked about career options with a counselor. And so what you see among the college-bound items is that you have room for improvement in terms of those people applying to 2 and 4, the 4-year college applications are doing a lot more of those college-bound activities. And in the career-bound, what you see, what jumps out at me, is that there's a lot of room for improvement. Not only are there fewer opportunities for things for career-bound students to be doing, but their level or rate of uptake is lower. They're not doing as many of the things that are out there for them. Staff support was adults at this school, whether it be teachers, counselors, coaches, whatever, encouraged me to continue my education, help me write an essay, help me find a school that was a good match for me. And again, there were college-bound items and there were career-bound items. And here again, you see a pretty high uptake on the college-bound activities and a lower rate of uptake on the career-bound activities and a lower number of opportunities for things students can be doing who are on a career, who are thinking about career after high school. So from our recommendation standpoint regarding this section of the data, we again are bringing to focus this finding that the high-achieving Hispanic students are applying to college at lower rates than other high-achieving student subgroups, and that we think more exploration of that is needed to identify what's the root cause of that, what's causing that. And then once you figure that out, or once you can understand that better, there'll be different recommendations depending on what you find and different, appropriate interventions based on what you find. And then we think there's a need to strengthen the support for career-bound students. And again, I heard a little bit about your career and tech focus that's upcoming in the next year, and I know a little bit about the programs that you've created just from talking with your staff at the beginning of this. So I know you've got some really great programs, this fireman, there's a fire program, and I know there's an EMT program, and I think our recommendations are more centered around getting the message out about that, getting more students to know about it, getting more students access to those programs, and hooking them in middle school, because these programs they score very high on engagement, right? And the kids that are falling out are the kids who aren't engaged. And so if we can get them hooked on these ideas earlier, it may help get them into the programs in high school. Facilities, again, straightforward, we asked them about what the facilities were like. I'm going to show you all of the items, and I used this shading just to help show patterns, because you got to kind of step back and look and see the big pattern. Green is good, red is bad, white is in the middle. That's fine. Okay, so if you sort of step back, every one of these rows represents an item, but I'm not even worried about that yet. What I want to show you is this is how the items were grouped. And what you can see right away by looking at the pattern is that things are pretty good in terms of equipment and furniture, and most of the negativity is centered in that space and facilities. And I'm going to go in and show you the items, but this is sort of the big picture. And so these were the items. I don't know if you can see that from where you sit, but the equipment and furniture items were all about the equipment being in good working condition in the science labs, the technology equipment being in good condition, parking lots being in good conditions, equipment being in good condition. In the cleanliness, we had a real issue with bathroom cleanliness. That came up. And what I like about this approach is, kids will be kids, and you might have some sort of general negativity, but when you look school by school, there's some real variance here that we think is important to notice. If 25% of the district said that bathrooms were clean most of the time or always, that's low. But then if you go over to Seguin and Lamar, you have, really significant variation from that mean. And then in the space and facilities, there seems to be complaining about crowding, too much traffic, long lunch lines, and not enough tables at lunch for people to sit. So to me, that was a real message about crowding. And again, some schools more so than others. And this is, you're doing a facilities audit. I'm sure you're getting more detailed information there, but we thought that bathroom cleanliness issue probably deserved some further investigation. And the space and crowding, capacity studies, and looking at bond programs for new schools, renovations. You're already doing all of that. So. The last area was about school safety and respectful environment. And here we had, again, a lot of items. And so we ran a factor analysis. We identified which items sort of clumped together to measure unique constructs. And we identified 3 factors. One was really about safety and feeling safe and being safe in school. One was about, I have them right here. Sorry. One was about staff respecting students. And all of the items that fell on that construct were about teachers respect me, school staff listen to what I say, they believe I can be a success, they treat us fairly. And then there was this one about student respect, that students respect each other. We try to stop bullying if we see it happen. And so again, what we did here, just to make meeting and to look for patterns in data rather than having just a million items with percentages, is we calculated means on each of these scales, and then we ran analyses of covariance to look for differences between schools on these safety and respect constructs. And so what we found, again, baseline measure, room for improvement. If on a 4-point scale, you imagine neutrality is 2.5. So these are just the means on the scales. So school safety is pretty close to that sort of middle place. Staff respect was the highest of the 3, and student respect was the lowest of the 3. And then when we looked at differences by student demographics, we found some, nothing that jumped out at me. Again, they were small in size. You can probably look at this later. The scale was from 1 to 4, and there were just some small differences by student demographics. But because the schools are can be very demographically different from each other, in the analyses we ran, we statistically adjusted for these differences when we're looking at school-by-school differences. So if you look at school-by-school differences, what you find is that Venture and Arlington High School were significantly higher than the mean on safety, while Bowie, Seguin, Houston, and Lamar were significantly lower than the mean on safety. And I want to point out this Lamar score for a minute because I'm going to come back to that on a future slide. For staff respect, we had Arlington and Sam Houston significantly higher than the mean, and Bowie, Seguin, and Lamar significantly lower than the mean. And on student respect, and also you can see when I jump from staff respect to student respect, you can see that them all go down. So that's clearly something to look into. Here you have Venture and Arlington, again, significantly above the mean, and Bowie, Seguin, and Lamar significantly below the mean. And then we asked them, how safe do you feel? In locker rooms, in bathrooms, in the hallways, just flat out, how safe do you feel? It was a 4-point scale. All I'm showing you is the answer of 1 on a 4-point scale that says I do not feel safe. And overall, I think these numbers are pretty low. I think they're, it's a subjective sort of assessment. But what jumps out at me in terms of a pattern is that you have higher scores of not feeling safe at Lamar High School. So again, we don't really know what's underlying those responses yet. So we would recommend, if you were going to look to do something about it, that you would run some focus groups at those schools. And representativeness in your focus groups is important. Make sure you get students from different grade levels, different spectrums of the achievement scale, different kinds of backgrounds to talk to, and find out what's underlying their responses. When they answer they don't feel safe, why? What is it? Because you don't really have actionable data yet. You need to find out why don't they feel safe. And another thought is this is only seniors. And if you're really going to focus on school safety, you need to talk to or get input from everybody at the school. And that's it. Oh, and one other thing. One thing that we're currently in the process of doing, we haven't finished yet, but I did bring a sample for you, is we're creating school-level reports. This is a wrapped watermark all over it because we haven't had a chance to use the data. But we're creating these for each school. And it's going to show you, for every single item on the survey, how did they respond from that school. The front page, you'll see, shows the school compared to the district. And then in the back, you see the individual items for everybody in the school.
Thank you so much. This kind of information is why we put this in our strategic plan and did that. I think it's very eye-opening. At this time, I would ask my colleagues if there's any questions. While we're waiting,
I know, I went so fast. I tried
no,
so
you did a great job presenting. It was very eye-opening. I would ask Dr. Cavazos, what's the next steps, I think, most importantly, of what staff plans to do to address this?
I think the next step is to review these results with our staff, internalize them, and I've said often, and I think in different survey results, it's the important part of all these assessments and the results we get is what we do about them. And so internalize those, accept them, and then form actionable plans to change them and to improve. And so meeting with high school principals and putting this as part of their, on their radar. I think what's important to note is what you said earlier, which is it's certainly a baseline. As we move forward, surveying students at other grade levels, I think is going to produce significant information for us as well. But there are some very significant areas that need improvement. And so those are things with counselors and things like that that we'll be addressing.
And I hope each school will see how they rate to other schools. A little competition's always a good thing, and I think it needs to make them address that they understand where certain schools are lower than other schools, especially in certain areas, because I think some will be shocked on some of these results, and some kind of expected. So with that, Mr. Pompa.
Thank you, President Hogg. Wow.
I know.
And I had looked at this before I came today, and yeah, there's some things that really jump out at you, screaming off the page. But you know, the one thing that struck me was when we were developing our strategic plan, one of the most powerful pieces of that was when we brought in students, and they gave us some feedback, and it was brutally honest feedback. We said, hey, listen, you can't say anything in here that's going to get you in trouble. And they told us. And what struck us was, what was impressive to me was we're trying to figure out how do we educate students. And we had a lot of really intelligent people, and business people and education people trying to figure it out. But when we asked the students, they really gave us the answers.
Yeah, they know.
They know.
They know.
And really, that was one of the most powerful pieces of our strategic plan. And looking at other, that was about instruction primarily, but obviously looking at some of the other factors that go into your school experience, they're also telling us the things that we need to address.
Yes.
And the areas where we need to address them. And completely agree with Dr. Cavazos. This isn't about beating anybody up or anything. It's, this is where we are today. We know we're not where we want to be. If we were where we wanted to be, we wouldn't be spending millions of dollars on a strategic plan and implementing that. We know that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But this, now we know exactly, you know, with graphs and colors and every which way you want to look at it, from this perspective, we have a great idea where we're starting. And like you said, it's what we do about it. I believe that there's some KPIs. Dr. Carter, you know, that's my favorite topic, that can come out of here in terms of some measurables for the district that can help us see improvement in some of these areas where obviously we have some challenges. So I did have just a couple of questions. Glad to see that we had a great response rate.
So great.
80%.
So great.
Again, I think that's commendation for our principals and how much they buy into what we're trying to do and how much they're really focused on improvement. They all understand we're not where we want to be, but they all want to be part of a winning team, and they're completely locked into what we're trying to do, so that's great to hear. Another observation was how much their perception of the curriculum aligns with our performance as a district. Math. We already know math is an issue across the district for us. And this only confirms it, and they're aware of it. And that's, you know, a disservice to the students and something I'm sure that, you know, we'll be addressing immediately. And final comment is surveys subjective, right? And so you can kind of question the veracity or the, you know, how applicable they are. But when they align so well with our achievement data, I think it lends a great deal of credibility to what we're seeing here. I mean, this is real, this is accurate. So great job for your team and putting doing the surveys and putting the information in a way that it's actionable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pompa. And one quick thing, Ms. Solons, if you don't mind, before Mr. Pompa goes, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder. Dr. Carter, is there some way with that, you know, I look at this one sample school you gave us, the draft. I understand it's not finalized. But you see response rate, and there's, you know, we can have some overall scores. Is there a way to directly correlate that and show with achievement, you know, one score of overall score on the survey versus overall achievement score
Yeah,
and
we
show that
actually-
variance for
yeah.
one single. I know
We
in my
started this
business,
conversation, yeah.
in my business, we have a client satisfaction survey, and we directly relate that to revenue, and we show we increase that satisfaction survey, here's how much more revenue we expect.
There's a myriad of possibilities of correlating this with a lot of things. I mean, you could spend the entire year of just that kind of analysis. They have an awful lot of information themselves, even with the GPAs and everything. But we can link those things because they have the student IDs, with all these things. And we can bring in the end of course, well, not the end of course again, but just generally the high school, just the high school performance on all of these things. And so some of those tables can be drafted that way too. But you have to remember that it's probably looking more like with the SAT scores, for these seniors, because these are the seniors.
Right.
So we don't have the end of course exams. We don't only maybe the past tax tests that they had, and how do they do on those, and is there any kind of differentiation along those lines? So there's a lot of ways to analyze this further.
And we know this is just our baseline, but as we grow it, I think, from all those metrics we're judging on, if that can be broken down by each individual school, and then an overall survey score, something of that nature. That's why we have you two guys to figure out data analysis and those things. But I think, showing that and then making it very apparent of how well we do on this survey directly correlates to your achievement. I think it's a nice thing to constantly put in staff and students' eyes to remember why we're doing all this.
And this is why we very strategically, when we did the survey, we kept it connected to their ID. It was completely confidential.
Of course.
But we were able to match it back up to their administrative records. And so this allows us to do all kinds of sophisticated analytics on their responses, not only on their responses to their achievement, but if you wanted to track these students next year, you could even look and see how many of them actually enroll in college. You can do
Great
that.
point.
There's a tremendous opportunity here for more analysis.
That's outstanding to hear. Ms. Sullins.
Which we plan to do.
Dr. Which we plan to do. I love to hear that. Love to hear that. Thank you, Dr. R. Ms. Sullins.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and a comment. In many of the charts, we talk about the students that are applying for college 2 and 4.
Yeah.
And 4, where do our dual credit seniors fit in that? Because I assume they've applied to be part of the Tarrant County system. Are they in the 2 and 4?
It depends on how they responded. So that demographic was not something that was in the administrative data. It just depends on how they answered the survey. If they say they applied to a 2, if they say they applied to a 4, if they said nothing, they were categorized based on their response.
Can we tell how many of those are dual credit students?
I mean, I don't have the data. I never requested it, but the answer is yes. You can link that and find that
Okay.
out, yeah.
All right. I think that was one question I had. And then this is, wow, I have to use the same word there. This is very good information. Do you have the same type of analysis or any way that we can do a comparison of where Arlington is? How do we look to other urban districts or so forth with the same kind of analysis?
I don't have data from other districts.
Okay.
There's probably some research we could do, like looking at literature that's published on what other districts are reporting, but we don't have comparable data points.
I was just
from other
curious.
districts.
Earlier today, I was in a meeting and I met with someone who talked about a number of the initiatives that are underway in Arlington schools, from this survey this evening, some of the survey work we're doing with student group, the curriculum management audit, facilities audit, strategic plan, the number of big, heavy lifting foundational pieces. And I just wanted to pass along the comment that I heard earlier today, and I thought it was it's very true that it's a strong, confident organization that are very intent on being the very best, that take on these in-depth type of analyses in the first place. And I'm certainly confident in that we have the team that's intent and has the motivation to do something really wonderful to move this district forward with it. So I'm very pleased with that we're to this point with results, and more importantly, to applying remedies or making improvements for the district as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullins. Mr. Barron.
Thank you, President Hogg. Amy, would you confirm again that when you said high-performing Hispanics or blacks or whites or Asians, that you were using actual GPA numbers to get those. They weren't student estimate GPAs.
Correct. So there is one caveat. So yes, they are real GPAs. We didn't know which students were on the honors track, so there are some students in the B group who are probably in the A group because there's an adjustment for their advanced placement courses. So there's a little bit of an overrepresentation in the B because we didn't know how to adjust GPA. But it is actual GPA. And we used, your district website has the cutoff for what GPA is what that we labeled A, B, and C.
Okay. And as far as who applied to which schools, that was just students telling us what they have done. That was
yes. There was another question
questionable
about
data.
No, that was student reports, and there was another question about what do you plan to do, whether you plan to go, and that'll be in the report. I didn't present it tonight, but there's a little bit of a difference in who's saying they're planning on going and who's actually applied. But again, it is self-reported applications.
Okay, so it looks like we have some leadership problems, classroom teacher issues. But mostly I'm concerned with the safety. If our seniors say there's a safety problem, what are our most vulnerable students, the freshmen, going to say? That really concerns me. And I think we need to jump on that before next year starts.
I agree. Thank you.
And that's all. Thank you.
Great point, Mr. Barron. Seeing no other lights, I think, I'm glad we have people in this world that analyze all this data, because it is awesome to have. And we look at this and say, how have we not had this in the past?
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you, I've worked with a district that's been doing surveys biannually for 12 years, and it is so powerful to be able to look at longitudinal patterns and change over time when you know what you've implemented and you know what you've tried to change, and you can look and see the patterns. It's very powerful.
Perfect. We are glad to have it, and we look forward, and we know this was a baseline.
Yeah.
And now it's about progress, as Mr. Pompa said earlier. How do we increase these numbers to the benefit of the district? So with that, we thank you so much for your time tonight. Up next on the agenda item for discussion, we have item C, Spring 2013 Parent Satisfaction Survey Results. Another survey. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Hogg. And continuing with our results from our strategic plan efforts, we have the Parent Satisfaction Survey coming up with the Studer Group. And Janet is here to present the results. Welcome.
Good. I was about to say good morning, but it's not quite there. Not quite that yet.
It's 9:45. We're good. We're good.
Shoot. Wrong. President Hogg, Superintendent Cavazos, and members of the board, thank you for an opportunity to be here tonight. I'm going to share two survey results. The first one, the parent satisfaction, and the second, the district services support card. So just before I do that, I wanted to just talk a little bit about last week. We were here working with the leaders. If you remember, the last time I was here, I presented the employee engagement rollout survey results, and we had a leadership development institute with the principals and the department leaders, and they rolled out those employees to teach them how to do a sort of 360 process for rolling out the employee engagement results. And when we came back last week and met with the leaders, we were debriefing on how that rollout process went. And I just wanted to compliment the leaders for those 2 days. And we mentioned it to them there. Out of all the sessions that we've done in the last 4 years, the leaders, I think, in your district took it the most serious that of those leaders that we've ever worked with. So just wanted to compliment them, because I think they're really looking at the data for the purpose of improvement, and that's what the meaningful part of this is. So just wanted to refresh our memory in terms of what we've done. We've implemented the employee engagement survey. We'll talk about the parent satisfaction results and the district support card services. So let's look at the parent satisfaction piece. There's some good news in the parent satisfaction piece. And first of all, I think the fact that that we had 7,178 parents respond is a really good start for a parent satisfaction survey. And if we look at that, what we decided to do is we work at the parent satisfactions for the purpose of really continuous improvement. So it's important for us to work with each school leader to engage parents in the process of completing the survey. So one goal next time will be how do we increase the numbers for each school, and how do we proactively do that, and how do we have a strategy for doing that, and then how do we also increase the results and the means. 20% of the surveys that were completed were non-English, and we thought that was good. We thought that was a good start. We had two survey in Spanish, and the survey was in Vietnamese. So I thought that was really good. And the other piece of good news is on a scale of 1 to 5, the mean was a 4.22. So I think you should be really proud of the beginning parts of the survey results. When we look at, remember last time, I'm going to kind of follow the same flow. We just are going to look at the district high-level results. You have the report that digs down to the individual schools, and you also have the report that provides some comments so that you can look at the specifics and the context. I'm going to show how it compares to districts that we've worked with that are on the same journey. And remember, we're looking at the baseline survey. So we're pulling the baseline for other districts. And when we look at the baseline mean, AISD has 4.22. And so if you look at that, you're one of the 3 highest in terms of beginning of the baseline score. So I think that's a pretty good start. We were working with the Menominee Falls in Wisconsin at the beginning of the week, and Robin was presenting the results and did her southern wahoo, really screaming wahoo. And the board looked at us like we had lost our mind, and so they didn't know how to react, so they just did the wave, So I said, that'll work, a wave or a wahoo. But I think this is reason to celebrate. A good starting point, relatively good parent satisfaction, real good parent satisfaction. What we find as we look at the means of each of the items, and you have those items in your survey results, but what this shows is item 3 and item 13, we see a dip. And the 2 items, here's what the 2 items say. The item 3 asks parents to rate the extent to which they receive feedback about a child's progress, okay? And that's rated lower. It's got a 3.99, so it's one of the lowest. And then question number 13 is, I receive positive notes or phone calls home about my child. Okay, so when we look at, this is common. This is what we see as a pattern across districts. And so when we're looking at leadership development and working with leaders on strategy, then we pick these 2 items to say, what can we do? What specifically can we do to improve? These are the 3 highest, so I think it's kind of interesting looking at the results before. One of the highest items on the parent survey was the school is clean and well-maintained. Okay, so from the parent perspective, in terms of the data that we had, the parents had a perspective. They probably didn't go in the bathrooms. Yeah. My child has the necessary classroom supplies and equipment for effective learning, and my family is treated with respect at the schools of 4.39. So I think especially that last item, and I know that was one of the areas that Dr. Cavazos really wanted to target in on. So the fact that you have a pretty high mean, really high mean for that speaks well. The 3 lowest, I had mentioned before, the last 2 regularly receives feedback about how well my child is learning and the positive phone calls and notes home. And the other one is common. This is a very common low item. School rules, discipline plans are enforced consistently at this school. Okay, so, but it's really not that low. What we did is pick the 3 highest, 3 lowest, and you still have for that one that's the lowest, a 4.18. When we look at the 2, to show you the context of these 2 means, the lowest means, the green represents where AISD falls in terms of those 3 lowest. So that's all to say for most school districts, those are the 3 lowest, and you're kind of in the middle in terms of how low they are in relative to those other districts. This is also news to celebrate, following the pattern of the employee engagement survey and the 2 superintendent items. You have a lot to celebrate with the superintendent items because Dr. Cavazos rates higher than any other superintendent that we've surveyed. So congratulations. Now you have to improve.
Expected information, but now proven. So
But I think that speaks, I mean, it just speaks volumes, really, for where you are at a starting point and the bright future you have as you begin the journey. And so then those are the two means for the superintendent items. So I'll stop there with the parent survey and ask if you have any questions. Remember the open-ended questions, same type of open-ended questions. We ask parents what's working well, what areas do you think could improve, and is there anyone in particular that you would like to recognize that's been extremely helpful to you or your child at this school or in the district? And so you have that data that you can look at those specific pieces. And what we do is highly encourage the school leaders to openly recognize the people, the teachers and the staff. There are some unbelievably specific recognition statements that parents provide to teachers and staff, and a lot of good news, and especially in the working well piece. And then they can also look at the areas that need improvement.
Perfect.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Janet. At this time, we will take questions. I would advise my colleagues, let's stay on the parent satisfaction piece, because the next agenda item that we will make a jump over into the OB presenting is a support card survey. And because we have listed them as separate agenda items, I would like to
Okay.
keep them separate, if at all possible.
Be great.
So at this time, if we have any questions over the parent satisfaction survey, it would be the perfect time. Mr. Barron.
Thank you, President Hogg. On the parent satisfaction survey, the 7,000 plus results, were they limited to one per family or one per student, or were they not limited at all?
The directions were for parents to fill out a survey based on where they had children. So if they had a child at an elementary school and a middle school, they would fill out a survey about the elementary school and fill out a survey about the middle school.
Were they paper surveys or computer?
Both. We had computer and we had papers, and we had a high number of paper surveys.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. What we found, and I mean, obviously it's easier to do the online, but what we found, our goal is to try to get as many parents as possible to fill out the survey, to provide that input back to the schools. And what we found in the experience, and I don't know why, but what we found is that parents usually like paper copies. Okay. And so we think it's important to provide them that opportunity to do that.
So did every child take one home?
That would be up to the school. What we encourage, I would say no. Every child did not take one home. What it would be, it's up to the school leader to really build a system in place for the child to take that survey home, or to provide an opportunity for parents to come in and to do it online. So what we've seen, you'll begin to see increases. You'll automatically see increases in the number of parents, because after the baseline, leaders strategically figure out ways that they can get parents in to complete the survey. Okay. The other part is that this last week we also taught the leaders to roll out their survey to parents, the survey results to parents. So very soon after we meet tonight and they get their results, then we've asked them to go ahead and roll that out to the parents so that we can let the parents know we're listening to them, we hear you, and here's specifically what we're going to do as a next step, which hopefully will get more parents to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Janet, do we have, I guess, a data point set that shows where most of these results are coming from? Sections of town, like, do we have a map of the AISD and all of our schools, and we can show what percentage came from each school?
I don't have that in there. I have the list of schools. I have a table with the list of schools, the means by schools, and the number of parents that completed by school. But
So
we could easily,
our schools, we will be able to, on the raw numbers, see exactly how many came from each school, because
yes,
I think that's an important factor on
Yep.
on your leadership,
And-
Dr. Cavazos, for your principals, to make sure we are getting that from
Right.
each school. And if you're not getting it, obviously, they're not communicating
Yeah.
out to their teachers, and that needs to be fixed.
and so as a goal, we have two goals usually in this next step. One is to increase the mean, but the other is to increase the participation. So we're looking at both of those as factors too.
And my question was, I want to make sure it's not coming from just a couple of schools or just a section of town, that we are getting a true cross-section throughout the entire district.
Yeah, and it looks like you did. If I just kind of flip through, I mean, if you flip through, you have a better sense of that
Right.
probably based on what you know of your schools. But if you flip through the schools, there's the number of parents and the mean, you'll get a pretty good kind context of where the surveys are coming from. But it looks like there's a good cross-section for the
Okay.
most part.
And Janet, let me ask one more question. On the number that completed it, are you satisfied? Was it high, low? What
For a
did you-
first time,
What did you
yes.
expect?
Yeah, for a first time, yeah, absolutely. Comparatively speaking, I mean, that's what comparatively speaking, I think this was probably the highest. Yeah, I think you had the high, I mean, in terms of looking at size of district to the number of participants.
Comparable with other districts our size?
Yeah, I think you're closer, if not the highest, you're right in there in terms of the highest with the baseline information. And what we usually find, in the second administration, we usually find that districts double, almost double what they get. Because it all boils down to, why am I taking this survey? Good communication out for why it's important. And by the way, here's what we're doing. We're doing something about it, and specifically, here's what we want to do, because we want to make a school that's great for your child and a place that welcomes you to where your child is going to school.
Perfect. That's wonderful to hear. Ms. Holmes, did you have a question?
I did, but to no surprise, Dr. Pilcher already answered it, so thank you.
I thought you were going to say, no surprise, I asked it, so. No, I didn't
No
think
surprise.
that. Don't say anything. We're all right, Ms. Holmes. We're okay. With that, seeing no other lights, I would say, let's move on to the next piece, which is our service action item D, which is spring 2013 service support cards. Dr. Fassos, I think I know who our next speaker is, so please go right ahead.
Okay, good. This is the district services support card. The individuals who complete this survey are the principals and assistant principals of the schools, the leadership of schools, that complete it by rating the district offices, the departments, on their level of satisfaction, or the extent to which they believe that the services are provided by the district services departments are satisfactory to what they need to do to improve student achievement. So that's the purpose of the survey. So we had 123 leaders complete the survey, and they can complete all of it, or they can complete some of it, depending on whether or not they've received services. This, by the way, is the support card will be administered every 45 days. Yep, take summer away from that, but every 45 days we'll administer this, and we'll create 45-day action plans, very strategic steps, and then we'll reassess and do those short cycle planning pieces. The district mean was 4.02. The long-term goal, this is one we kind of set a proficiency measure. So departments at the beginning, we have a kind of a love-hate relationship at the beginning, because this is sometimes this is difficult news, because what we really say here is that departments really should hit a proficiency of 4.5, because the purpose of departments are really to provide great services to schools. So we're really pushing the envelope purposefully with them. So really, I think it's a great starting point. Again, there's some very specific information in terms of areas of improvement, but I think a 4.02 provides a good starting place. If you look at how it compares, it's a 4.02, so it's somewhere kind of middle range. And then if you look at the news here, so if we were looking at an area in terms of what we need to work on in the district, compared to other districts, the starting place is not quite as good as where other districts have started, okay? But not on the very low end as well, okay? So we have a good starting point. We then broke it down by division. So the support card, because there are so many divisions and departments within the divisions, we broke it down first into divisions, and then for those divisions that had numerous departments, we created a 1 to 5 scale for those departments within divisions. So for example, curriculum and instruction is a big division, and there are many aspects of curriculum and instruction. So we asked principals to rate curriculum and instruction on accessibility, accuracy, attitude, operations, timeliness. And then once they did that overall rating of the division, They then went into each department under that division and gave them a rating of 1 to 5 based on the services that were provided. So it gives that division, so what a division will say to us, well, if it's curriculum and instruction and I have 10 departments, how do I know where? How do I know where the services are provided in places where it's better than others? And that gives them at least an indicator for continuing the discussion. So when we look at accessibility, accessibility means can we reach a live person either by electronic tool or a particular resource? Can we reach someone? Accuracy, did we receive the right product, service, or was there a variation communicated? Attitude, did we experience service with a smile? And even when we are getting service from a telephone, we can tell if the person is smiling on the other side. The operations, do day-to-day operations run efficiently and effectively? And timeliness, do I get a response when people tell me that they're going to complete a product, or do they give me an option? Do they keep coming back and basically saying, here's where we are in the process of trying to help? So that's where we look in terms of those are the results by department. And in your results report, I didn't dig deeper. In your results report, you can look at 2 things. One, the 1 to 5 rating by department, and then there are some very specific comments. What we ask leaders to do, if you give a division a 1 or a 2, we ask them to please provide a comment so that the individuals can have some information, individual leaders, to improve. And I think you'll see there's some common trends, some common comments there that I think will be very helpful for the departments for improvement. So and I'll take questions on that, but I just wanted to end with a slide to say I think it's a good start. This is baseline. Our goal is to roll this data out, to build short cycle plans for improvement, and to keep coming back and determining how well we're doing along the way. We started with an employee engagement score of 3.80. Parent satisfaction is 4.22, and the district services support card is 4.02. And if you remember what we talked about last time is there's something that we've seen as a trend. I'm not sure it's a really good trend in school districts, but our employee engagement scores are lower than usually our parent satisfaction scores or our district support services scores. And so what that tells us is we really do have some work to do with the people who are working with us. Questions?
Thank you, Dr. Pilcher. As we wait to see if any board members have questions, I would look at Dr. Cavazos and say, earlier there's been discussion about employee morale. I think pay is an important factor of that, but I think also making sure employees know that we are analyzing and looking at the ways to make support services better for them, especially to our teacher staff, to let them know. Mm-hmm. So, employee newsletters, this type of thing where this is good to say, hey, here's what we saw, here's what we need to work on and fix. I think that's another area for employee morale to really help employees see, guess what, these people you work with and are trying to make your job a little easier and better to come to. We are trying to work on those things and addressing them. So just a thought right there. Mr. Hibbs.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I haven't said very much tonight, but I did pick up on 2 things, and I think that they are indicative of our district right now. One is that with the downsizing that we did a couple of years ago, we're just now trying to reestablish many of our departments, and I know that we were running very lean, and last year we experienced a number of retirements and such, and a lot of our departments are just not being staffed fully, and we're trying to do that. So I expected that as it would come back with the curriculum and instruction, that would be one of the areas that we'd probably have been a little bit lower on. The other would be the personnel itself, our personnel department. What this all goes back to, though, is I truly believe it's how well we communicate with those that are working with the district. When people come to the departments, whether it be personnel or curriculum and instruction, and have needs, or, you know, it's how, you know, being able to look at timeliness under somebody responding back when someone from a particular department says, I need help with curriculum instruction, and that timeliness was the lowest component.
Yes.
I think that's something that we could look at and say, hey, we need to, just like we are for our parents,
Yeah.
we need to be customer friendly.
Yes.
In that particular area. And then it's the same thing with personnel, is timeliness and accessibility. So I think those are some areas that just jump out at us that we should be looking towards. But I appreciate the results.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I think that's, there's, communication is the key. When we look at leadership development and we work with the Leadership Development Institutes, there will always be a communication component attached to whatever the strategy is for the rolling out of data or just strategically communicating better. What we find is there's absolutely very few people who intend not to do a good job. I mean, people are trying to do a good job and they're working hard every day and wanting to do the best job that they can. And when somebody asks for something, that person's need is the most important to them. And so, but there are 50 people who probably have a very important need. So it's a matter of really building good processes into how do we communicate in a particular way so that we can manage that. Because the expectation can't be, I can meet every person's need exactly, but how do we build better processes so that they know what, so they don't feel like we're ignoring them, but they know that we're trying to work out a process to help them. Because I think, for the most part, people are trying to help.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Pompa.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. I think Mr. Hibbs makes a great point that, especially when you look at the lowest scoring number is the timeliness, which is, if you're shorthanded, it's kind of hard to get back to people, you know, quickly. And the other thing I was going to point out is some of these areas, you know, personnel, and we're either have a vacancy or we have new people. I did notice that, which one was the technology and communications was pretty high, so Mr. Chad has a high standard to improve on. Welcome, Chad. Anyways, just great point, Mr. Hibbs. Thank you for pointing that out, that our staff really has been overworked for, you know, a couple of years, and we are working to rebuild that back up. And to the leadership out there, we hear you, and we're working on jumping on top of this and fixing it. So I like your structure. The 45-day rhythm is great, because that, you know, I think that'll help drive some real improvement relatively quickly.
Yeah, and it'd be very helpful to the leaders so that they know how they can jump on it pretty quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Pompa. Dr. Cavazos, some last words?
Yes. Thank you, President Hogg. I'd just like to say, and thank you to all the presenters tonight. I think we've hit an important point in our school system. We're operating more on data and feedback. We're uncovering some things that are very important. We're making decisions about moving forward with objective data. In many of these areas that we've talked about tonight, facilities, students, employee engagement, parent, many times districts and systems rely on anecdotes, and you heard that even from David Anderson today, and we all kind of chuckled at that. But knowing that we're looking at objective data to improve our school system. And we started this year with saying that our non-negotiable was improvement, and that everybody would improve, from the superintendent to every employee. And so this provides that tremendous opportunity, and we're here where we have good baseline data, we have high expectations of staff, we know we have vacancies and things in certain areas, but we know what the standard is, and we know how to look at data objectively and then make some changes. And again, I'll say it again, the most important thing is what we do with this information. And that's what I've shared with the community and the parents and the students, et cetera. So thank you for your work. Thank you, Gibson, and the facility assessment group that was here earlier. I think we're making a tremendous amount of progress.
Very well said, Dr. Cavazos, and I think it's easy for the board to ask for these type of things and take a hard look, and I know it's even tougher for staff to get some of these results back and really take a deep dive look, and staff has done an outstanding job with very much openness, saying, how do we get better? And that's what it takes to truly, we can have all the ideas we want. If staff doesn't buy in and do it, it doesn't work.
That's right.
So I thank you, Dr. Pilcher, I think Gibson Consulting, y'all did a great job on all this survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next item we have is open forum for non-agenda items. We do not have any cards tonight, so we will not have any discussion. Next, we have Superintendent's report, Dr. Cavazos. And there's no superintendent's report. So maybe we're at a trend. Are there any school board reports? We've met every week this entire month. So I would make one real fast school board report and just make a quick announcement. If you aren't, Arlington High School Alumni Association is holding an annual open house on Saturday at 10 a.m. in the Arlington High School cafeteria. It's always interesting to see all the alumni from Arlington High get together and show their school spirit and support their high school. Mr. Barron.
I might as well do a quick one, and then I have a speech. Well, Fire Academy graduation was really awesome. Dr. Cavazos and I were there. The city council was there virtually en masse. Most of the leadership at Tarrant County College was there. The whole fire department, I think, was there. They had fire engines outside, and the chiefs, and Indians, and everybody. And it was a great night, and those kids were so proud, and their parents couldn't stand it. They had such a good time. Really a great program. Hats off to Craig Wright and the whole Current Tech department. And my little speech is on, when we do that pay thing, I didn't want to talk about this during the pay because it would have clouded everything. When we do the pay schedule and we look at the 0-year teacher and the 5s and the 10s and the 15s, as a teacher, as soon as you get that thing in your hands, you look, where am I? And how much did I make last year, and how much am I making this year, and how much of a raise did I make, right? Everybody does that. It's human nature. Right? We all do it. And then you know what they do next? It's kind of like the Hallmark card where you turn it over and see how much it cost. They go back and look at the starting teacher pay, and they look at the difference between that number and my new number for next year. And universally, teachers go, that's not very much. And all of a sudden, you say to yourself, I'm not making that much money, because look, this brand new teacher is making all that money, and I'm only making this much more, and I've been doing this for 15 or 20 years. And I got an email from a guy this week, a teacher, who said just that. And I didn't respond to him because I wanted to say it here. Sure, you can look at it that way and be depressed. Or you can look at all the money you're making this year and not compare it to last year or what the new teacher is making, but you can look at it and say, how much was I making when I was that 0-year teacher? And all of a sudden, that $2,000 or $3,000 difference is now $20,000 or $25,000, and that's a big difference. So don't make yourself feel bad. Don't look at what the new teacher is making, but look at what you made way back when you were a new teacher, and you'll feel a whole lot better. All right, so that's my speech.
Thank you, Mr. Glass is half full, Mr. Barron. Glass is half full. That was very nicely said. Very well said. So with that, we are not going into closed session, so this meeting of the Board of Trustees is adjourned.